Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 222 of The Team House. I'm Jack Murphy, here with Dave Park, D back there producing in the shadows, and our guest on today's show is Frank D'Alessio. He spent 26 years in the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, mostly doing a lot of undercover work, doing infiltrations of motorcycle gangs. We're really excited to have Frank here today and get into all of it with him. I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Dave?
So our first sponsor tonight is ReMedical. If you need accurate medical evidence that can help maximize your VA benefits, ReMedical is your place to go. And their team of specialists are passionate and experienced about helping veterans. Find out how they can help you at remedical.com. That's REE medical.com.
And our other sponsor tonight is Augusta Precious Metals. If you guys want to get into precious metals as a way to diversify your portfolio, please check them out. You can text TEAM, T-E-A-M, to 68592 or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. So I hope you guys will check them out. So Frank, again, thank you for joining us tonight on a Friday evening. Really appreciate it, man. I want to start off by just asking you the question we pretty much start all of our interviews with, is about your origin story. I'd like to ask you a little bit about, your upbringing, how you grew up, and sort of how that took you towards the path to law enforcement.
Well, I was born and raised in Youngstown, Ohio, born in 1965, and that was at the height of when Youngstown was really rolling with the steel mills and everything. My dad was a police officer. My uncle was a police officer. We had firemen. So, very ethnic town, melting pot, you name the ethnicity, and it was there. My family, Italian Catholic, a lot of guilt, loud at holidays. So, so I went to Catholic schools most of my life. So that was challenging too, because that was quite an experience. Had a great time, but just a different experience than the public school kids had. Played football. That was my primary sport. Went to Ursuline High School, graduated from there. And I went down to West Virginia. I won't say I played on the team. I was on the team, but I made it 1 year, and then it wasn't going for me. So I went back and I told my dad, I'm done. Of course, the disappointment, but I moved to Florida. My brother was living down there. So my buddy and I moved down to Florida, and after a couple of years of making $3.25, it wasn't working out. So I said, I got to go back to school. Now, when I was at West Virginia, I was a forestry major, believe it or not. So I had no desire to go into law enforcement whatsoever. But when I went back, I started having conversations with my dad about law enforcement. So I ended up getting a criminal justice degree. I got out in 3.5 years because I just wanted to get out of school. So when it come time to start applying for jobs, I applied to everybody but ATF. I had no idea what ATF even was. Okay. So my dad, if you don't know anything about Youngstown, it's the old Italian, I know a guy and I got a guy, because that's how it is. Right. So being Italian in Youngstown, you had as many friends that might have relatives that were involved in some things. Right. I remember my grandmother had passed away and we were at the funeral. And I'd only been hired like a week. And my dad says, hey, somebody wants to talk to you. And I'm like, who? And it was Joey Naples. Now, Joey Naples was the head of the crime family in Youngstown. And I went over there. He goes, hey, I heard you got hired by ATF. And I'm going, okay, how the hell do you know that? Right. But it was very small community. So like in Youngstown, you had people that went into firefighter, they were policemen, public service, working in the mills, the auto industry, U.S. Steel, Republic Steel, sheet and tube, they were huge then, right? So that was your path. But everybody had a bookie, right? And so you were raised street smart. You learned, you hung out at places and everybody got along. Nobody said anything. I could tell you story after story about that. I'll tell you one funny one after I got hired on a job. But so my dad goes, hey, go down and see Freddie Kylitz and Wayne Lovin. Now, Wayne was the RAC, the resident agent in charge in Youngstown, and Freddie was a friend of theirs. And these guys all hung out at the same bars. So, and they were all revenuer guys, right? This was back in the late 80s. So I go down there and they tell me about ATF, and I'm like, wow. Because ATF, which I didn't know anything about, very diverse. You know, we got alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. Now, when it comes to the tobacco and the alcohol, unless you're doing like moonshine, like 1,000 gallons and cigarettes transporting 1,000, you know, tractor trailer, ATF really don't get involved in that. But it was at the height of, you know, they talked about all the undercover they did when they were doing the revenue. That intrigued me, right? And this was at the height of when crack was just coming on the scene in the United States bad, and about the guns and the violence. And that kind of intrigued me. So I took the TEA exam, and like most of my compadres who took it, passing was 70. I failed it the first time by half a point, and I passed it by 2 points the next time. And come to find out, when I was at the academy, everybody's asking about what they scored. I think we only had one guy out of 24 that scored above an 80. So I didn't feel too bad then. I didn't feel like a big dumbass. And then it started. I got assigned to Columbus, and that was my first post, and off it went.
So what was the funny story that you wanted to tell about getting the job?
So I'd been on a job about 6 months, and so I go back to this bar called Cyrax. It was on the east side of Youngstown. And the one thing about the guys back then, Mike Sorecchio, those guys never messed with drugs. It was all numbers, right? And it was all, everybody hung out there. Cops hung out there, crooks hung out there, but it was like a Switzerland neutral ground, right? But he ran numbers out of there. Well, he's dead now, so I can talk about that. And so one time I go in there, my dad was down there on a Saturday afternoon, and I go in there to you know, just to have a drink with my dad. So we had pagers back then, right? So I get a page, and you could never just go into the back kitchen. You had to ask Mike, can I go back in there and use the phone? And he said, sure, go ahead. Well, first he walked back there to make sure nobody was back there. So I walk back in there and I dial up the phone, and I'm on the phone talking to my boss. Well, and I can never remember the name of this guy. In comes this guy. He's about 80 years old Italian guy, shuffling in with two grocery bags. And now they had a big butcher block table in the center, right? So I'm watching him, and I'm watching him. And as I'm watching him, he starts dumping out all his cash. and as that's happening, I'm on the phone, and Mike walks in, and I tell my boss, hey, I got to go. I hang up, and Mike goes, now, if you got to do something, you can do it. He goes, but before you do that, I got to talk to this dumbass over here. He goes, hey, do you know who that is? He goes, yeah. He goes, that's little Frankie Delicio. He goes, oh. Hey. He goes, you know what he's doing right now? He goes, isn't he in college? Mike goes, no, he fucking graduated. He goes, well, what is he doing? He goes, he works for fucking ATF, you idiot. The guy I thought was going to have a fucking stroke. I walk out of there, and my dad goes, where you going? I go, I got to go. I'll talk to you later. And then that stuff happened all the time. I mean, just because of Youngstown. I mean, when I was growing up, when the car bombing wars were going on in Youngstown, so I hung around with this kid, Bobby Pagan, right? Now, his dad was a connected guy. And so we would go watch Boom Boom Mancini fight great gold gloves down in Struthers at the field house, right? Now, I never knew anything about this, but it seemed kind of cool that they had like automatic car starters, you know? Mm-hmm. And anytime we would go, they would say, hey, we got to stop here to warm the car up. Well, that's when everybody was getting bombed, right? So his dad ended up going to jail. He got in a shootout with the FBI. He went away for some time. But, you know, you just grew up, and it was just a matter of people having guns. You know, it was just culturally, you know, you knew you were safe, but that's how we grew up in Youngstown. People, if you're from there, you understand.
Right. And so but when you graduated from the ATF training, they put you kind of back into your home turf.
Well, you know, yeah, before that, we had guys that were in New York, they shipped them to LA. We had guys that were in LA, they shipped them to New York for whatever, you know, because that old adage, well, you can't work in your own hometown because, you know, that whole FBI thing, corruption, right? Well, you know, so I ended up down in Columbus, Ohio, which was another shit show because ATF used to have these things called punishment posts. So if you were an agent that wasn't performing or got in trouble, they would ship you to these different posts around the country. Well, Columbus was one of them. Before I got there, they had hired 5 new people in Columbus, and they still had these 3 hanger-oners. And they eventually got rid of him. Tony Donardi was our rack, and he was brought in there for nothing else but to get rid of these guys. I showed up the first day on the job, and the guy who was my training officer, John Lickey, German guy from Chicago, that we were in a Bay Area, so our desks were butted up to one another. I'm all full of piss and vinegar. I sit down at the desk, and the other guys are watching because I don't know John, but they know him. And he leans over his desk into my face, and he goes, "ATF is a vindictive outfit. They're going to be out to get you." That was like 5 minutes on the job. Little did I know there's a lot of truth to that. But anyway, that was my opening to ATF, and it was like, holy crap. Well, so, we had all new guys, and the relationship with ATF, with the Columbus Police Department, wasn't really that good because, they really didn't interact with them, especially in narcotics. Well, like I said, we had a lot of young guys. We went to the academy. The old academies used to be, because ATF was very thick in bringing a lot of state and local guys on, because ATF is still one of the only federal agencies that doesn't require a college degree to come on. They'll exchange, work, investigative work for your degree. So we had a lot of state and local guys that were coming on. I didn't have any police experience. I was 24, but it was a good mix. And back then if you were like 28 or 29, you were old. So they were bringing all these guys on. And so we would go through all our training that's where I met one of my dearest friends, Darren Kozlowski, who we kind of went down the same way. So we're going through this training, and and you're learning everything. Well, then it comes to field ops, right? So field ops is the portion where, okay, you're going to take all this stuff you learned and you're going to take it out into the practical exercises. Well, when I was there, the question was, okay, how many of you guys want to work undercover, guys and girls? Like if there were 24 people, 22 raised their hand and said, hey, I want to do it. Well, when I was getting out of the academy, or when I was getting out of ATF in 2014, when I go down to instruct, you were lucky to get 2 or 3 people to raise their hand, because they're hiring different types of people, not worse people, but more professional people, so different mindset, right? I went through the academy, ended up in Columbus. So as soon as I got there, there was 4 other guys, and then we had basically our training officer was one guy, Don Mapley, who ended up becoming our boss. He took us all under his wing. And man, we just get informants, and we would just start making buys. We used informants initially, then we would start rolling in to make crack buys. And then we were just smashing doors, right? So eventually we started stepping on the Columbus Police Department's toes because we weren't deconflicting. So they were smashing our doors and we were smashing their doors. But the one thing that come out of that is they knew we wanted to work. So the relationship really grew. I mean, it was a violent time in Columbus. There was a lot of, street gangs, not like Crips and Bloods per se, but more like, ad hoc street gangs that were controlling different areas. And then we had the Jamaicans, and then you had the Jafakans. You had the guys that were pretending to be Jamaicans that weren't, and everybody believed because they had an accent, right? But those guys were shooting it up. It was pretty good, and so it was a pretty wild time. But I'll tell you what, it's great training because you learn how to do everything. I mean, you were in the middle of everything. That's when we started getting our taste of undercover, and we were running ops all the time. I mean, there were days we were doing 3-4 search warrants a day, just banging them down. We go make the buys, and then we go out and do that kind of stuff. So it was a great place to learn. And Don was a good guy because he took the time to train us properly, and he shielded us from a lot. You had guys back then who were stand-up dudes that would fight with management. Now, our SAC, Bill Wood, was an old revenue guy, good guy. If you worked, he loved you. He didn't hire anybody that didn't play athletics at any level. And we come to find that out after we all got hired. We were talking, he goes, oh, if you didn't play any kind of athletics, he wouldn't hire you because he believed that you need teamwork, sacrifice, because it was like, Frank, when you come on, you're going to miss anniversaries, you might miss holidays, and I took that to heart, and everybody that I know that came on that's had a successful career in ATF, you did miss a lot of that, a lot of personal time you lost with your family, but that's the conversation you have with your wife when you get married, and they accept it or they don't.
Could you tell us a bit about, I mean, was that the extent of your undercover training at that time? It was sort of OJT?
Well, okay, so ATF, unlike other agencies, because I worked a lot with FBI, HSI, DEA, they all have to go to an undercover school before they can work undercover. ATF, you go through the 2-week block at the academy. When you get out, you just have to raise your hand and say, I want to work undercover. If the RAC or group supervisor feels you have the ability to do it, down the road you go. Now, they're going to try to stick you with somebody who has been doing it or has experience, and it's all OJT work. Now, we did have advanced undercover schools, but it wasn't a requirement for you to go. Mm-hmm. So I never went to one. I've instructed at them, but because I was always involved in something. I got invited to go down and teach, but it was just, I would say for the guys in ATF, 99% of what they learned OJT and on the streets, and sometimes the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Frank, you mentioned your relationship with the local PD, but ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, but you're doing these drug warrants. How did you guys fit in with the DEA throughout your career? Was there a lot of cooperation? Did you step on each other's toes a lot?
To be brutally honest, because I'm gonna, we had, it's personality driven. Uh-huh. Let's put it that way. Sometimes if the boss is good, your agencies will click together because the guys will work good. If the bosses aren't good, or you got some agents that don't want to cooperate, hey, ATF had to chair assholes like everybody else. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But you try to work with people, you find those few guys to get the job done, because that's what it's about. So, I had friends with FBI, I had friends with DEA, but most of the time, they had their task forces, and they were recruiting off of the local police departments. Well, we went and made our own ad hoc task forces with the narc guys that we like to. I mean, one of my dearest, best friends in the world, he was 50 years old, as old as my dad when I came on. I did my first long term with him. He was getting out, Tom Strasbaugh. I mean, the stories. But but we were running and gunning, and it wasn't, they didn't give us the respect until we earned it. And we did earn their respect. And that's what we wanted to do, to where we can get on equal par. And we did with DEA and we did with FBI. And some people you can work with and some people you can't. So, there wasn't such thing as deconflicting back then, like the HIDTAs are now, and where you deconflict some of your work so that there's not any blue on blue, But that was always contentious, because it was a need to know versus a right to know. And right. Sometimes we never deconflicted just because of the sensitivity of the case.
Well, in law enforcement, what do they call that? Daxing? You got a dax or dex? I've heard guys use the term to deconflict. Well, there's techs. The treasury. Well, basically, HIDTA runs deconfliction. Okay.
So what you do is they have a deconfliction center, and other agencies are represented. So if you have a target or an address, or you're going out to do a warrant, or you have an investigation, you're supposed to send that in to them, so that they can make sure that nobody else is either going to hit the same house or location, and that there's no blue on blue situation. And, and if you're working the same target, this is where it gets tricky. If you identify the same target, then it becomes who has control of the target. And then that usually comes down to the U.S. Attorney's Office and who's in best graces with them. Because sometimes agencies will get walled out of their own cases because somebody has a better asset. Now, you'd like to think people can work together and do it, and it does happen.
So if you guys, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but when you guys have guys on like a deep cover and they're in with some serious hardcore players, right? Some shitheads. And if you get rolled up by local PD or whatever, because you're in this group of people and they're doing something nefarious, how do you handle that when you go to booking and stuff like that?
You go to jail. I mean, a lot of times, so the game has changed significantly on the long-term infiltrations. Like guys like the OG of Outlaw Motorcycle Gang infiltrations would have been Steve Martin with Langley and Timmy Buns, and there was one other guy, and his name's escaping me. They did the first, which you would say, modern infiltration of the Warlocks in Florida. And it was like a need to know. There was no ATF didn't even have op plans back then. So it was like, hey, we're going out to do something and we're going to do it and we'll let you know how it goes. And if something bad happens, we'll call you or we won't. Because there wasn't all this oversight, which towards the end, there was a ton of oversight. So, and that's where the case is, if you got rolled out, we get stopped all the time, right? So we had our identification, but you got to understand, for ATF, for the backstopping back in late 80s, early 90s, it was a collateral duty for one dude in headquarters.
Right.
And all he could do is maybe give you a social security number and a credit card, and they fucked that up.
Right. None of it was aged. It was like, yeah.
No, you could.
Oh, could you?
You could, yeah. And but the problem was, because now, mind you, there weren't even computers at this point in time. And the cell phones were the brick phones, and you had the old Motorola gray flip phone, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of technology, but the cops, right? They'd stop you, they'd run your license plate, or they'd run your tag. All that stuff was covered, right? So you were good. Now if you got caught with a gun, now hopefully if you did have cover team out there, you were working with me, they would flag those guys off so they didn't bother you. But we had our share of guys that got arrested and went to jail. And then you got to deal with it after, because then, the organization clubs are looking at you, the gangs looking at you going, okay, what's happening now? Because
They have to maintain their cover.
Yeah.
right. So you might have to spend a night or two in jail. We've had guys have to spend a night or two in jail because, they want to do all the bonding out and everything. You have to get your own attorneys, and you have to work with the judges on that to try to get that right. So you're not spending time in jail, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there was a lot of times that things would happen that our guys would get stopped and pulled over, especially on runs. You get checked out. But our backstopping got better. I mean, it did over time. Like my stuff during that time, like in my first case in Columbus, that went 3.5 years. And it was all self-acquire other than those two things, right? So I had to call people that I know, trying to explain to them what I'm trying to do. And they're like looking at you with three eyes. And, but it was all your own backstopping to cover your ass because, but they hired private investigators to check you out. So it was a lot different than it is now.
Yeah.
The guys are smart, federal Penn, state Penn, they're the best college education in the world because they know how we do things. So they start thinking outside the box now, how to try to catch us.
I want to get into that a little deeper. Let's give a shout out here to the sponsor.
So our sponsor, Remedical. Okay, let's take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Remedical. We know how difficult it can be to get accurate disability rating. I mean, anybody who's dealt with the VA knows what a nightmare that is. And to get the proper benefits despite your best efforts and multiple doctor's visits. Connecting new or worsening disabilities to your service just adds to the frustration. This is Remedical's wheelhouse. The documentation process they've designed to help veterans is unmatched, and the experience of the doctors in the network is invaluable. Now, every case is different, and Rees Medical can't guarantee what the VA is going to decide, but 90% of their clients reported receiving a disability rating of 70 or higher. Rees Medical nationwide network of disability specialists and medical professionals are ready to help veterans across all 50 states and those working or living overseas. So if you need an evaluation of your disability rating and accurate medical evidence to support your VA claim, turn to the experts at Remedical. Head over to Remedical, that's reemedical.com for more info. And really, it's an art, it's a science, and you really want somebody like Remedical on your side to help you get those disability ratings bumped up.
And our other sponsor is Augusta Precious Metals, and I just want to take a moment to tell you about that. I myself have bought physical precious metals before. It's a way to diversify your portfolio and protect your assets. Did you know that you can buy gold for your IRA 401k? Gold can't be tracked like digital currency. No one has to know what you're buying, and there's no way to print more, so you're protected from inflation. My best resource for gold IRAs is Augusta Precious Metals. Their track record is no less than phenomenal. They have thousands of happy customers. They are the absolute best. Learn why thousands of Americans are getting gold IRAs as part of their retirement portfolios. You need to contact Augusta Precious Metals and get their free guide. Text TEAM to 68592. Again, text TEAM to 68592. Team to 68592, or go to AugustaPreciousMetals.com. That is Augusta, AUGUSTA, PreciousMetals.com. So, back to you, Frank. I don't know if you want to pick up that strain of thought, or do we?
Actually, because I'd love to talk about, before we even get into your personal story, I'd love to talk about the challenges of undercover work. And for people who might not be familiar with like a cover, when we talk about backstop, that means that you have a history. If you have an address and somebody goes to that address, like that there are backstops to your cover. When we talk about aged covers, like nobody has a credit. You know, if you get a brand new alias that hasn't been aged, you have a credit rating of 0 because you have a card that's never been used. You know, you don't have any kind of, places where bills have ever been sent. And maybe back then it was harder to check that kind of stuff. Now, though, I'm sure the gangs are much savvier when it comes to checking somebody out. How was that undercover process for you when you infiltrated, when you started, and then how did it change through the years?
Well, I'm not going to get into the TTPs,
sure,
and all that. But what I can tell you is, so when I went into my first club, there was no check. Right? It was based on my informant vouching for me, them doing their own checks, seeing where I lived, just talking to me, how I worked, what I did. Right? They did their own personal thing. But then when I went out to Las Vegas and was working at Vagos, before you can get in, you had to fill out, it was a 1-sheet application, right? They ask you for a copy of your driver's license, copy of your social security card, where you lived and all that. And then you had to pay. And then they had a private investigator that was going to obtain some of your backstop, like your birth certificate. You had to tell them where you were born and all that. And remember when I talked about self-acquire? Well, the guy who gave me because we had a way to do, for credit and stuff like that. So, the thing is, it's no secret. The bad guys know today, because we've passed so many tests with them, that we could take something digitally and make it appear as good as anybody else on paper, right? Mm-hmm. It's the other things that are the challenges today. But however, so we had that all those mechanisms, well, not at that time in place. So one issue I had was, I filled out my application and something just didn't feel right to me. So I called a buddy of mine who had a used car lot. I said, hey, run my social security number and tell me what you come back with. So he calls me 10 minutes later and he's laughing, which is not good. And he says, hey, he goes, you got 3 people with that same social security number. I go, how the fuck can I have 3 people? I go, it's supposed to be issued to me only. So I make my call to headquarters, our Special Operations Division, and I talk to the young man who was in charge of the program. And I said, hey, man, I got a problem with my social. He goes, you can't. He goes, he goes, what number did I give you? And I gave him the number, and there's silence on the phone. And then I hear him go, oh, shit. I go, well, that's not good, dude. I go, I already gave these guys my info. He goes, well, that was the number we used to test the system. I had a black male, a Hispanic male, and me, all with different credit histories floating around now. So that was one strike, because then they start questioning me about that. Then the next strike was I had to acquire my own birth certificate. I had that all lined up, right? The day that the private investigator makes contact with the county, guess what? The guy I had on board out sick. He gets called back to the private investigator and he goes, well, it's a very good forgery, but it doesn't come back to that guy. So I'm under the hammer, getting hammered on all this because, but the thing is, greed is a beautiful thing because they really wanted us in the club. So they were overlooking a lot of stuff because I had some shelf aliases because we always had multiple, and they got into this, why were you using this alias or why were you using that name and not this one? I said, because I don't know you motherfuckers, and I'm not giving you my real shit. I go, this is what I'm into. Well, anyway, they believed that. We went down the road and, and then that case ended because the other agent who was working, Darren Kozlowski, who was working the case out in Hollywood, got blown out of the water. They found out who he was. They still thought we were good, and I got a phone call talking about how they wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill him too. But anyway, so that case didn't end real well. However, what it did prompt was the initiation of our Undercover Branch back in 1998, where they're like, we got to fix this, right? I had no desire to go into that. Undercover Branch. I was pissed. I just wanted to go to another post, but I got yanked in, and 3 other guys were there, and we actually started our branch, and we got a good sponsor, and then we start doing our own backstopping the proper way, and and it morphed. But every time we do an infiltration, like I said, over the course of 40 years, I think we've probably done 20. Now, not all of them were long, but there were some that went long and were damaging, right? So they all talk. They have meetings. Even the adversarial clubs will talk about how they were infiltrated. And I'll tell you, it came down to the applications changed. When the guys were going into the Black Rain case out in California, the Mongols case, 3 of them had to get polygraphed. Okay, wow. They had to pass that. That was another shit show because I was running a branch at that time. And you know what ATF's concern was? This is how fucked up this was. We're talking about 3 guys who were getting in. They got to pass the polygraph. If they're in, they're in, right? Their concern was, if these guys learn how to beat the polygraph, well, if they ever come under internal affairs investigation and they have to take polygraph, how will we know they won't be? That's the pettiness bullshit, right?
Yeah.
So they ended up all taking the polygraph and passing. Wow. And then they all got in. And in that case, it's history. They did they took down that whole play. That's probably the single best investigation in ATF from start to finish. The Outlaw case in Virginia was very similar. And the Pagan case up in Long Island, where they actually went and they took out the leadership, like the national presidents, international presidents. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, finish your thought, but I'd like to backtrack a little bit to your personal experience, your introduction into that world. But please continue.
Well, I mean, it's just changed so much that these guys now, they look at you and it's like, okay, they understand over the course of 40 years that we could look at you all day long on paper. We know you're going to have a house. We know you're going to have cars. You're going to have motorcycles. We had guys that came to work with us just to verify we were working, to take a look at how we worked, security guys, just to see what was going on. They'd come and look at your house, looking for cameras. They do all that mess, right? Well, then they start thinking outside the box on what can they get you to do that cops wouldn't do, feds wouldn't do. They don't worry about informants because although they can be damaging, they're looking for the infiltrators, right? Cops, law enforcement. So, so the game did change quite a bit towards the end. Guys were going through some pretty high hurdles to get in these clubs. And everybody thinks that we got in these clubs because we wanted the patch. It was never about the patch. You can only go so far in an investigation, right? As a hang around or an outsider. And sometimes that's good enough. You can do enough damage doing it that way. And it's better because getting a patch and deciding that I'm going to go in and probate a prospect, which could be from 3 months to a year, right? You're at their beck and call. And it's hard to do business because everybody's watching you. So there has to be a real reason to get the patch. And that's so you can get on the inner sanctum and go further, right? But that was never the goal. Everybody always say, oh, you guys just want to get the patch. No, we don't. No, that's the byproduct of the investigation because then you really are owned by the club. They watch you, they look at you, they see what you're doing. A lot of scrutiny. A lot of those guys were right for the wrong reasons, accusing, all the guys over the years of being cops. They just couldn't nail it down except for the one time. But other than that,
So walk us back a little bit to, you're a semi-seasoned ATF agent, I take it at this point, when you start doing the long-term undercover work. No. Well, tell us about your entryway into that line of work and how that came about.
So when I was young, I liked riding motorcycles and mini bikes and all that stuff, right? So one of the agents in the office, Rodney Russell, he had an informant who he did a big drug RICO case on a bunch of black gang members. But this dude was white. But he also had ties to a lot of the biker clubs, right? So I'm talking to Rod. Rod goes, hey, he's got some hooks into some of these clubs. He goes, would you be interested? And I'm like, well, shit, I like to ride motorcycles. But, I'd never been around like club life. I didn't know really what that was about. So that's when I start calling Steve Martin and saying, Steve, now he's in the middle of his investigation with the Warlocks. And I'm trying to get educated on how should I act? What should I ask? How do I not piss these people off? So he's educating me, right? So I'd been going to a couple bars in the area, just kind of getting, and I didn't even have a motorcycle. So my good friend Tom Strasbaugh, who was on the Vice Squad at the time, he had a motorcycle. So I had to go borrow his motorcycle to go start riding with these guys, and he was very gracious with that. So I'm riding a motorcycle. So I get invited to a part. Well, the CI gets invited to a party at this club called the Road Saints on the south side of Columbus. And he goes, come on. He goes, this would be a great place for you to meet. He goes, the Avengers will be there. He goes, there might be some Outlaws. He goes, there'll be some Road Saints. He goes, this is a good place to get based on. I go, I'm in. Now how old was I? I was 20. I've been on a job like 3 years, three and a half years. So this is like trial by fire. So the CI shows up himself because he don't have a bike. He's there in a car. So I roll up on my motorcycle. There's a lot of people there. And, I'm, hey, how you doing? How you doing? An hour into the party, Columbus Police Department and Liquor Control come and raid the house. And I'm shitting my pants. So I take my gun because I don't want to go to jail, right? So I throw my gun under the house. I'm getting rid of anything that could be construed as a weapon because we normally carried more than, one gun. And so the police are patting down their ID and everybody, And luckily, because I had been running out on the streets of Columbus and stuff, that there wasn't anybody there that recognized me. Okay, so party breaks up. I go back to the bar the next day to see what's going on. I sit down at the bar. I'm having a sandwich and a beer. 2 Avengers walk in. 2 Road Saints walk in. They pull me out. Now I'm not a small guy by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I was bigger back then. And they pull me out and they put me up on a wall at gunpoint and go, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, what do you mean, who am I? I go, I'm Tony Franco. That was my name. And they go, no, who are you? I go, I don't know. So this went back and forth for a half hour on, hey, I was the new face that showed up. The house got raided. Who are you? Are you with Ohio BCI? I don't know where they came out of that. And it was like, so for I was getting hammered for half hour, guns. Well, eventually, I think because I was young and I was able to talk, just talk, I had a good gift of gab. They're like, all right, but it was like, we're going to be watching you kind of deal. So that was kind of discouraging. So yeah, a little scary. So, so things kept on and I kept going around. And then stroke of luck for me. Now, at this time, I started pulling my buddy Tom Strasbaugh started coming around, and he was an narc. Now we had to be real careful because that guy had been in homicide, narc, vice, so we had to kind of limit his exposure. But one of the best mentors I could have ever had in my life. So he taught me a ton, and so we're sitting there, and I start pulling him in. Well, about a year into this, right? We've been buying LSD, we've been buying all kind of stuff off of the peripheral, the edges, and a few club members from the Avengers. Well, I call him my friend now, my informant. I've known the guy for 30 plus years, right? Didn't have any criminal history. He had done a case down in New Orleans. Okay. So Easy Rider, if you're familiar with Easy Rider magazine, well, they used to do rallies around the country, and Columbus was a big one. And they actually opened up a motorcycle shop in Columbus, and my informant and his best friend, they ended up going to work there. Well, I got a call from an agent down in New Orleans and said, hey, I need you to do me a favor. We got to pay Tony some reward money for the case he did. He goes, do you mind going and seeing him? I don't know, send it up. I go, we'll blend. So we stop at the Easy Rider shop, Tom and I, and it had just opened. And we walk in. Now his best friend, who's now deceased, Stump, who we didn't know, we go, hey, we're looking for Tony. And he's looking at us. Now, at that time, I had real long hair, and Tom looked like a bucket of shit too. We rolled in on motorcycles, and he goes, well, hold on. And I see him take off up these stairs. So Tom and I follow him, and we get up there, and there's Tony standing there and Stump, and they're grabbing shit to start beating the hell out of us. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're like, what are you doing? They go, who are you guys? I said, David sent me, which was his control agent down there. And it was everything, kind of softened out. And then within talking to Tony, he knew that whole crowd because he used to be in a club called the Outriders. It was there a long time ago that had become the Brothers. And we just start talking. He goes, man, I can get right back in with those guys if you want. He goes, I'll work for you. And then it was like, boom, we were off to the races. And for like the next 2 years, man, we were running between Ohio, Michigan, Indiana. We were running everywhere, make buys. We dealt with just about everybody. We had our share of issues, but it was a different time because, I would tell my boss, hey, I'm leaving Columbus. I'm going to Akron, then I'm going to go up to Muskegon and a couple other places along the way. I'll be gone for a week. Okay, just make sure you have contact with an agent and let them know if you buy anything, just make sure you're passing off. That was our coverage.
Yeah.
So that was it.
If you guys, I'm assuming you weren't necessarily patched at this time with any particular club. How did you guys get bona fides with these clubs, not belonging to anybody in particular? You're just kind of like independent.
You were one of the hang-arounds, as they say, right?
Well, not for those clubs. We were more like independents.
Yeah.
Like, so we were around. We were doing business. Tony, like for the brothers, Tony was friends with those guys. So that was the way in. The issues we had, they had a couple other chapters, but they had closed. The only other chapter of brothers they had was up in Akron. And then there was the guys up in Michigan. Now, the guys in Akron, they were old school hard ass sons of bitches, man. And they really didn't have an affiliation with any major club because most smaller clubs will,
right?
Because they have to.
Right.
They didn't. The Hells Angels got along with them. They didn't get. Now the brothers didn't get along with the breed at all. There were plenty of times when we went up there, we'd go hunting for them guys, But the Hells Angels left them alone because they did their own thing. They were a violent crew, but nobody really messed with them. They did, for a long time. They did their own dope, guns, grenades, whatever you wanted, you can get from those guys. So we eventually, Tony, we talked about getting back into the club, and then Tony got back in. Now, the guy who was the president of the club, his name was Wap. He was, so let me explain. When we go into clubs, if they're in disarray, we generally go in and make the club better. Mm-hmm. We organize the crime better for them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
They're all over the board. So we go in there and organize the crime so they're more profitable and more streamlined to make money. And they always like that about it. Most of our guys that ever went into a club, within either going from a probate or a prospect, you usually went to an officer position right away. Mm-hmm. Whether it was sergeant at arms or treasurer or vice president or even president, because we were smart, but we had to be careful. We didn't want to be seen too smart, like we knew too much, because we never wanted to say we were coming for another club, because then they could check that, right?
Right.
So we just had to be good criminals,
right?
And we had to bring something to the table. And when you go in as a young guy, what do you got to offer? I mean, you're a new guy coming in, right? So you're expected to be a little bit more rowdy, maybe fight a little more, maybe drink a little harder. The drugs were a whole different issue. With that, if you guys want to, the whole simulation, deception within ATF became a big to-do because, guys learned how to appear to be doing drugs, but not. And we got drug tested and nobody ever popped positive, and, but we had to make it appear. Now, the older you got in those clubs, it was easier to fade that off because It's like, hey, I had a problem a long time ago. I don't fuck around. If you're still dealing at the level you were when you were 25 and you're now 40, something's wrong with you. You're a bad crook, right? So you should have something about you in your game. You should be able to throw some money around and look like, it's all smoke and mirrors, make them believe what you want them to believe about your business.
Yeah. How do you guys avoid, if you go in and you organize a club so they do crime better, how do you avoid the sort of the entrapment angle that a defense attorney is going to bring?
Okay, so we don't tell them how to do the crime. We don't direct the crime.
Right.
They're talking about how they're moving their drugs, and they're talking to us about how they're doing it. And, so we have this thing, it's out there, street theater, where we do blue on blue deals that make the bad guys look like we're doing actual deals, but it's actually with cops, right? Or other law enforcement, and they see, oh, you're legit, and we'll bring them along as bodyguards, we'll pay them and all that kind of stuff, but we don't direct the crime. All we'll do is we'll go in there and we'll go in there and they'll say, well, how do you guys do it? It's like, well, and we'll get into, how much they're selling, where they're selling, who they're selling to. There were a lot of times in these clubs. So it's like anything else. You spend a couple years with people, you're going to get relationships. You're going to find people you actually like. There are only, as Tom once told me, goes, there's only a few people in this world that don't have any redeeming qualities. And we came across a few of them, but most of these guys are likable, or so do girls. I mean, they're crooks. They can be assholes, but most of them are likable. Then you got the others that are just in these gangs, in these clubs, because they want to be a part of something, feel special, right? I could tell you probably every guy that's done an infiltration can tell you they had somebody or a couple people in the club that I had at least 3 that would come up and say, hey, we want to get in the game. No, you don't. Why do you want to get in the game? I need to make money for my family. This isn't the way, dude. If you get caught, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
And some of those guys you would make see the light and you could steer them. And then some were so hell bent on it that it was like, all right, dude, you want in the game. This is what we need. Go find it. And then, you try to give them some consideration on the backside to help them out, but they go to prison,
right? Because
they don't want to listen. You can't just say, hey, I'm a cop, don't do this,
right?
But you kind of steer them away that it's not the right thing for you to do.
Yeah,
Frank, for people, the uninitiated people, most people are not going to be nearly as initiated as you were. Could you explain a little bit about what an outlaw motorcycle club is, and like what that culture is like? The old ladies, the 3-piece patch, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so an outlaw motorcycle club is generally distinguished by a 3-piece patch, which means you have the top rocker, you have the bottom rocker, and you have the center patch. And the center patch is usually going to be the mascot, right? So let's just take the Outlaws for say, right? So the top of it will say Outlaws. The center patch is the skull and cross pistons, which they refer to as the Charlie, okay? And then the bottom used to be city designators. Now, some of the old chapters in most clubs, they'll still have a city designator, but now they've all gone to states for the most part, that they own the state. And then there'll be the MC, the motorcycle club, right? So, and then on the front, they'll usually have various other patches and memory patches, and there's stages. So you start as a hang around, and that could be for as long as they want to get to know you, right? And it's changed dramatically. And then you go through a prospect phase. Prospect, probate are interchangeable depending on the club you're in, right? And that period could be from 3 months. It could be up to a year. Okay, Hell's Angels have the longest. It's generally a year. Everybody else folds in there somewhere, right? And then while you're prospecting and probate, you pretty much are owned by the club. So you got a sponsor. Somebody sponsors you. You have to get voted to even be allowed to prospect probate. Okay, so then once they say okay, then you're responsible to the club. People call you. You got to do all the bullshit. You got to watch the bikes. You got to clean the house. We had guys that were digging trenches for their bosses, their yard work. I mean, whatever. They're not supposed to do that kind of stuff, but pretty much you're their bitch until you get voted in. And the vote has to be unanimous. If one guy says no, you're out. So, and when it was originally used to be to the charter, to the chapter, right? Charter is pretty much what the Hells Angels call it. Everybody else is a chapter, right? Some people say charter, but mostly it's Hells Angels that use that. And so you come up for vote, right? They vote you in, and then you get your full patch, which means, and there are phases. Like a lot of clubs will have, like, when you're a probate or probationary, you'll have a patch that says probate or probationary member of the club. Sometimes they'll give you the bottom rocker, just the bottom rocker and the MC. Sometimes they give you the bottom rocker and the top rocker. Sometimes, and then you progressively earn your patch until you get the center patch. Then they have probationary members, guys that they bring in as full patches. You get a full patch right out of the gate, but then you'll have like a P or something that says you're a probationary member, which means you're a full patch, you have all the rights, but you're still on probation for a year. So they do that in special cases when they want to bring guys in, they think bring something to the table. So it used to be like there was a tree on how this went. Now it's a shrub. Everybody kind of does their own thing on how they bring guys in, and it used to be where the chapter or charter would vote for you. Like if you had 8 guys in there, those 8 guys would vote. Now, a lot of time it goes to a national vote. Like because now they send pictures. Does anybody know this guy? They send pictures into the prisons. They do their real due diligence on you to make sure that nobody knows you as a cop or an informant before they bring you in. Because they've been stung so many times. I mean, some of these clubs been stung 2 or 3 times by ATF.
Mm-hmm. And the drug, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the drugs, explosives, prostitution, I mean, they tend to be involved in a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have, obviously, you got the felons with the guns. There's a lot of extortion. There's, a lot of home invasion, a lot of drug dealing, gun running, a lot of explosives you can purchase. I mean, it's pretty much everything. They got their hand in prostitution. The thing about motorcycle clubs, it's like, if you're not involved in that game, they're ghosts to you. People, they might notice a motorcycle going down the road, right? But they don't notice the club because they stay to their own element unless there's a reason to come out of that element, because that's where their power and fear is. So, like take my mom. Oh, I saw Hell's Angels going down the road the other day. No, Mom. No, you didn't. I go, what did the thing on the back look like? She goes, it was like a big pig. I go, well, that's not a Hell's Angel, Mom. But that's what everybody knows, so everybody's a Hell's Angel. Everybody's an outlaw motorcycle gang member. They want as little to do with the public as they want the public to do with them for the most part, other than trying to show a good posture like the Toys for Tots and all that stuff that they try to do. But no, I mean, so people are oblivious to them unless you live in that world. I mean, still today, I ride down the road, pack a bicycle by them, looking over my shoulder to see who they are, just because that doesn't leave you, right?
Yeah. So,
but people, if you don't live in that world, but it's a violent world. It's a very violent world. I mean, women, there's property of women. Now, either you belong to the club or you belong to a member. If you belong to a member, she's hands off. If she belongs to the club, it's game on, right? And they serve at the beck and call. Women have, it's, the club, the bike, and the woman. Now, a lot of guys won't tell their women that because they're afraid of them, but that's really how it goes. You know what I mean? Women are that's the least concern on what's going on with those guys, most of those guys. It's the club first, because in the end, it's all about loyalty to the club. That's what it all comes down to in that patch.
And that first infiltration out of Columbus, where you guys were running around doing cross state buys and everything. I mean, how deep did you end up going on that one?
Well, I had my patch for about 1.5 years in that one. Okay. I became the sergeant at arms. My informant became the president. And I mean, that was, the Brothers, it wasn't a big club. However, it offered a lot. So we seized the Outlaw Clubhouse. There was another, a black 1%er club, true 1%er club called the Phantoms. They were based out of Chicago. They had a clubhouse in Columbus. We had another informant who was the only white member of that club.
Wow.
He was married to a black girl, and he brought us in. And we had stars and bars on our stuff, and they didn't care because it was about business. I'll tell you a funny story about those guys. So they loved us. They just loved us. So, and we met them before we even got in the club because he was running while our other informant was running. So you had the Avengers, you had the Road Saints, yeah, like I said, the Outlaws. I mean, we ended up seizing like 6 or 7 clubhouses. We put like 130 people in jail. It was a lot of dope, a lot of guns. It was crazy. But it's one of those things where we weren't focused on one club. I mean, we were in the Brothers and we were focused on those guys, but we used it as a catapult to get in because the Outlaws were recruiting us hard to jump over there. And we're like, no, because we didn't want to go. We had a good thing going in that club because we could write our own ticket. Tony and I went wherever we wanted to go at any point in time. And the club didn't ask us any questions, where if we were in a big club like the Outlaws, people be watching you. They have mandatory runs. They have all this other baloney you gotta do to be in the club. So we were in a good spot there, but we were able to, get into a good position with a lot of those clubs to arrest a lot of those people.
And when did what was that decision point when I assume the U.S. attorney is like, okay, this investigation's over. Now we're moving in and making arrests?
It's never the U.S. Attorney's decision to end it. It's always ATF's decision.
Okay.
And ATF's decision is, well, you guys have been running a long time. Now, at this point, we had just made another move into another club up in Michigan, which was going to be really good for us. But it was like, okay, you guys been in a long time, 3.5 years doing this. It's time to take it down. We weren't ready to come out, but you're going to do what you got to do, because we also got involved in this big cocaine distribution ring where they were bringing coke in off the coast of Florida in Marathon, and they were running it up to Sevierville in Tennessee, and then they were bringing it up through Columbus and up into the north. And we ended up tying into this young kid who we were buying off of, and he laid out the whole operation, which enabled the Columbus Police Department, DEA, to go up on a wire, a Title III, and they're like, hey, we got to take this down. So that was another catalyst that kind of drove our case, because they were going to take it down and we would have been outed, you know. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like because motorcycle gangs, like so much of crime, right? We think of the mafia, we think of motorcycle gangs, we think of street gangs, but they are all peripherally tied together when it comes to
Drug
aren't they,
distribution.
in terms of like spreading drugs, like a certain element might own a piece of it, but they're all somehow a lot of times interwoven.
well, traditionally, Hell's Angels and especially the Outlaws and the Pagans have all done work for traditional LCN. You know, they were their muscle. You know, it just historically it's there. You know, they've always played a role in that. You know, in the traditional, mafia type of deal, doing whether they were moving product or whatever. That's always been around. I don't know so much now that it is in the United States, because there's really not that much, from what you see, it's more Armenian, Russian, and everything else that's controlling the underground more so than the Italians. But, I could be 100% wrong on that. I don't know. But the clubs are still involved. And what you're seeing more now is the traditional white clubs, right? The Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs, because there are, the traditional Outlaw Motorcycle Gangs, are white and Hispanic. Right. They don't allow the blacks in. Or if they do, it's an anomaly. Right. Like a lot of clubs, like the bigger clubs, can't have them. Just can't. They're not accepted. But then you have 1% black clubs like Thunder Guard, Outcasts, clubs like that. Violent. Oh, are they violent? And they kind of pair up with some of the traditional OMGs, and they're doing a lot of business together now. Because it's all about controlling turf and whatnot. In the old ways of where you had, it was very delineated on what clubs will wear. Now it's not. They've all crossed over, and that's why you're seeing more shootings, more violence happening, because it's just there's no more lines of delineation. Everybody's still fighting for their turf.
Interesting.
So
That's
that
right.
one winds down, and then as an undercover officer, I mean, presumably you have to appear in court, right, as an ATF agent and testify.
Yes.
And I mean, does that? I'm just curious. Like, doesn't that totally blow your cover as an undercover officer, like indefinitely? I mean, in your case, it didn't, but I mean, I'm curious how that works.
Well, so I'll tell you. So most guys that I know that have done these cases, and in ATF, there's like 10 or 12 guys that have done these cases, and some have done multiple, right? So when you're in those clubs for that long and you're around those guys, you form allegiances. And I'm telling you, the night before the takedowns go down, and I've had conversations with all my buddies, it's like, man, I want to call this one dude and just tell him to run. I just want to, because then the Judas effect comes in, right? Because it's twofold. The Judas effect comes in because it's there, right? These guys were guys that if on the street something happened, they had your back. They'd kill, they'd fight for you without question, right? So you had that. Then the other side of it is okay, I've been this dude for like 2 years, 3 years. I knew what I was doing all the time. Now this is going to be over, and I have to reintegrate back into normal agent, right?
Right.
So you're thinking about that kind of stuff. So, when you look at how these things end, and then I could tell you this much, in every case that I've worked or I've helped work, and so, a lot of times they'll bring guys in who've done these cases when they have takedown to come interview certain people to try to move them along to cooperate. When our cases were done, we had hardheads that didn't want to cooperate. The day they were taken down, we'd walk in the room and they would look at you and go, "Son of a bitch."
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them would be, "Hey, we understand it was a job," and they get it. And then there were others didn't give a shit. One of the biggest things that they get wrapped around on, because when you're talking to these guys, you're bringing in about 90% of your true life, just changing names and if things happen and you tell them stories, they, where there might evoke an emotion out of them. They want to know, did you lie about that? Or was that real?
Yeah.
Because if you lied about that, then you're a real asshole. But okay, because they just want to see how far you would go.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you can straight out lie about some things, but but it was a very unique dynamic. I mean, every case that I did, you meet those guys, and it's like, man, in another world, we might have been able to be friends if it wasn't this.
Right.
But then again, if they knew who I really was, would they really be friendly with me and treat me the way they're treating me while I'm in? So,
But if you weren't ATF and they weren't, in an outlaw bike gang, had you met other completely different, two different people, like that this was somebody, and it's interesting because when we talk to like CIA case officers, a lot of times they'll say sort of similar things that that the people they work with, their agents, or the people, like, they develop a rapport with them, and this person might be a shithead doing shithead things, but it's like when you get to know somebody as a human being, they're not just all shithead. Like there are elements.
We had this one guy when I was doing a brother's case. His name was Doc, and Doc, he was a drug dealer, but he wasn't a violent guy. I mean, he was a real likable guy. And there were certain members who would get together because clubs are very cliquish. They just are. And he called up one day. His son was a drug dealer too, and somebody went up on to his son's house and shot him 47 times with an AK, right? And of course, his dad, who could be violent, I mean, he wanted to go start kidnapping people because his son was involved with some black gangsters, and he was just ready to start smoking everybody. I mean, we felt really bad for him, and we're trying to talk him off the ledge, which we did. Because, we did have genuine concern. We could have said, yeah, well, go screw yourself and go do whatever you want, Doc. We're not getting involved with that. And he'd have probably got himself killed,
Yeah.
In fact, he liked me so much after he had a lot of medical problems. We helped him out because he had bad cancer. After we arrested him, within a year, he was dead. But Tom Strasbaugh and I went over to visit him after we went to his house. He actually got a dog, and he named it after my undercover name. So I guess I got that going for me.
Yeah.
He's dead now. Yeah. But no, you do form those bonds.
Yeah.
After that initial case was prosecuted, I mean, then now you have a ton of experience in this world. I mean, how did the segue into the next infiltration happen?
So a part of the case that we were doing in Columbus took us out to Las Vegas. And we were dealing with some guys out there, some Mexicans out there, and we were buying meth. We were buying pounds of meth and bringing it back. So, so there were some threats made, and ATF, they're just terrible at somebody makes a threat, and the first thing is they want to move you, right? I'm like, why don't you go? So let me back up and tell you a quick story, because you guys will appreciate this. How times have changed. We had an agent in Cincinnati. He was investigating the Iron Horseman. Okay. And they tried to run him down with a car while he was on the street. Now, the SAC at the time was Bill Wood, an ornery man. And, he's a quarterback at South Carolina, but he is a revenue. He calls up my boss in Columbus, and he says, I want Frank and I want Dan. He goes, you send him to Columbus, and he's going to meet some boys there. He goes, and you're going to go have a talk with the president of that club, and you're going to tell him what's what. And we did. He sent us down there. There were four of us went with one of the agents from Cincinnati, knocked on the door to chat. The president come out. He goes, can I help you? He goes, and he laid it out. He goes, you guys fucked up. He goes, we're going to find out who did it, and then we're going to fuck with your club every step of the way until you guys turn in who did it. within 24 hours, they turn the guy over. That's how you handle business. It's not like you sit there and chew your nails. They knew, again, crooks don't respect, excuse me, sir, how are you doing today? They, power, fear, might, that's what they respect. If they don't fear you, they're not going to do anything you say. They're not going to come around. They're not going to talk to you because they're going to look at you like you're a big puss, you know? So that ended that. I mean, they turned the guy in. Well, ATF didn't do that in my case. It was like, Frank, there's 4 offices that are open and 3 of them were shit, and Las Vegas was the only one. And my wife, awesome. She was always willing to work. And I had a conversation with her before we got married. And it was like, look, because we got married during my case, and I did that case. I was, and I told her, I said, this is what I do. This is what I like to do. And she liked to move. So when I asked her, I said, how about Las Vegas? She goes, let's go, because I knew the boss out there, and I'd already been out there, and I knew the work was good. Plus, they had just started an investigation because they called me, knew I was getting transferred. They were starting a case into the Vagos, who were recruiting real heavily out there at the time. So we packed up and we moved. And as soon as we got there, it was like, okay, Vagos are recruiting. So I brought my informant, Tony, out to Las Vegas with us. And, well, not with me and my wife. He lived in it. We got a house and he was living in there, and that's where I was living. And, with Stump. And, so they said, just go to this tattoo shop. And this guy, Sharky, who was a Vago, he goes, he'll recruit you guys right in. He goes, you guys are big dudes. He'll ask you right in. So I didn't know how good the tattoo shop was. So the informant was going to get the tattoo because we needed a couple hours just to fill these guys out. So I said, Tony, I'll pay for it. Get whatever you want. It was a terrible tattoo. However, it was so bad. It was so bad. But about halfway through the tattoo, Sharky comes out with his colors. And of course, we're playing stupid because we can't act like we know anything about club life. And he goes, do you guys know what these are? And he held up a set of colors of the Vagos, and we're like, no, what's that? He goes, the Vagos. He goes, you never heard of us? I go, no, dude, we're back east. We know who you guys are. So he goes into this whole spiel. He goes, well, because we rode there on motorcycles. And he goes, why don't you guys come around? This is how easy it was. He goes, why don't you guys come around? We're having a meeting like 3 days from now. Now we're introduce you. And that's how easy that was, getting invited in over there. Then that case, again, with the whole backstopping issues, started to, at first it was good because we were there, and I think that case went a total like 18 months. But, we were getting good. We were buying off of people. You know who we bought off of, which you guys will find funny? What's the name, that show? The Pawn Shop.
Oh, Pawn Shop? Yeah.
Yeah. We bought off of Joe Henderson. I used to go in that shop all the time because all the time I buy dope.
The Las Vegas Pawn Shop?
Yeah. So we said, because it was only like 2 blocks down from the ATF office, believe it or not. I mean, it's just the shop, they make it look huge. It was this little box, but we used to go in there and buy dope all the time. We put him in prison for a few years. But anyway, long story short. So we're going around, now, Tramp, Terry, who was the national president at the time, he took a liking to the informant and I. He took a real liking to us. And at the same time, we were trying to get into Vegas. Darren Kozlowski was trying to get into the Hollywood chapter. So we were making our inroads. Now, the thing is that we would know him because we were getting a little bit more credibility on our end. So we were going to help him move along. So I think I don't know how long into his investigation he was in, but he had an informant, got T-boned on a motorcycle and got killed. Okay. But Darren had given him his card from when he was back in Milwaukee, or it was a long, yeah. I think it was a Milwaukee card. But anyway, so that kind of dies off, and Darren's working through his thing over there, and we're working through our thing in Las Vegas, and the informant and I are constantly traversing back and forth between Las Vegas and more so than even the club is, right? And we're getting to know all these guys. Well, we come up, and we're going to, now they're going to allow us to prospect, right? So, so there was some stuff that happened. So they had this run up in Reno, and the Vagos were trying to make a statement up there, right? So they were going to go at it with the Hells Angels. So again, we go up there. They have us tote all their guns up there, the informant and I. So we bring all the guns up. So they have this master plan that they're going to go to this Hells Angels bar, and I can't remember the name of it to save my life. And what they're going to do is they're going to wait for the Hells Angels to come up, the Reno chapter. And when they come in there, what they're going to do is they're going to push them out the back, and they're going to beat the living hell out of them. That's the plan. Well, we're having this meeting as a club, and there's me and Tony, we're not even prospects at this point in time. They hand him a bat and me a hammer and two other guys. And they say, get behind the bar. And they go, when we flush these dudes out, it's your job to beat the hell out of them.
Holy shit.
And of course, I'm looking at Tony, and we're just, you can do nothing but laugh, right? We're chuckling. And so we go stand back there, and we're just praying at God that something happens and we don't have to do this, because it's going to turn in. We don't know.
Yeah.
So we're out there for about a half hour, and then a couple of Vagos come out, and they say, hey, okay, everything's good. They've had some negotiations in there. We're good to go. We're like, okay. So that broke that, which was awesome, right? But the stress was tremendous. And so we go back, and now they're going to have a national meeting, and it was happening in Las Vegas. So this is where we're going to start prospecting. Me, my informant, and Kaz. So we all start prospecting on the same day. But you get brought up, so there was probably 100 members there, 100, 200 members. You come into, I think we were at the VFW hall. You go in there, and they bring you up on a stage, and they're like, are you willing to die for the club? Are you willing to fight for you? You're willing to do all this stuff, right? You're like, yeah, I'll do whatever I got to do. Then they ask, is there anybody in here who's got anything negative to say about these brothers or why they shouldn't get into the club? And because we did what we did up in Reno, which wasn't anything but just stand there in terror, they were all, hey, these brothers are down. They stood up for the club and blah, 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 all this mess. And so we ended up getting our prospect rockers, right? So we were prospecting for about 3 months. Now, there were times like stupid stuff. Yeah, one thing that bother guys like us are some of these cop clubs out there that want to affiliate with clubs, and then a lot of the military clubs, because they recruit out of the military hard, right? Yeah, we were at a thing, we were at an event in when we were with Vagos where I can't remember if it was the Choir Boys or what cop club it was, but we were sitting there with some of these with some of them and a couple other clubs, and these guys were pointing out their own undercover guys that were in a crowd. Yeah, like that guy over there, that guy. We're like going, you guys are pieces of shit, man. Yeah. And that's like, and then we were at we were at some function in Las Vegas, and this guy Jack Roberts, he was an old school Las Vegas cop, big Irishman, hands the size of my head. And he would talk about getting in fights with the mafia dudes all the time. They would go to the bars just to get in fights. He's just a great guy, right? And so he was the only guy that was like covering me. He and Randy Probst was another agent in the office. They were really the only guys that knew what was going on. So these guys contact Jack Roberts from the Henderson Police Department, and they say, hey, we're going to go out there and cover this event. And Jack goes, well, hey, dude, if you're going, go overt, because if you go overt, they won't mess with you. You know what I mean? You're taking pictures. They expect that. These two dudes show up, man. They're taking pictures. They're trying to dress like they're blended. And of course, Tony and I are the prospects, right? And CJ, who was our president, comes over. He goes, hey, go find out who those guys are. And I'm looking, and I know, because I know they're cops, because they couldn't be anything else. Yeah. And Jack said there might be two guys out there floating around. I'm looking at Tony. So we walk over there, and okay, we got to do. I'm like, and we had guns. I had a gun. Tony didn't have a gun. I had a gun. And I walk over there, and I'm like, hey, man, who are you? And they're like, oh, no, man. I said, give me your driver's license. I'm like, fuck you, guy. I go, give me your driver's license. So they're looking. I go, you better give me your driver's license. This would be a problem. So they hand us over their driver's license, right? Now, they weren't they weren't their true name licenses, right? And then I was told we had to take their cameras. So we took their cameras and we smashed them, right? And at this point now, the club has come in and circled them. And it's like, well, it's out of our hands. I go, if they're going to beat them, they're going to beat them right now. So at this point, CJ is the voice. And he's telling them, get the fuck out of here, blah, 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 blah. So they start walking back to their car. And of course, CJ tells Tony and I again, follow them back to their car and get their license plate. Now, Jack is off on the side watching this. And I'm assuming these guys got guns. They have no idea who we are.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like following them, half-stepping, waiting for them. And Jack is watching because he doesn't know what they're going to do either. They're going to pull their guns and start shooting, right? So this is a slow walk of about 25 yards to this car. Well, we end up getting to the car, and they get in. We get the license plates down. You know, this dumb sons of bitches drove their personal car. It doesn't sound like, they're not heroics, and people are like, oh, like the movies. It's things like that though, when it's happening and you're sitting there and you don't know if you're going to get shot by, other police officers because of who they believe you are, and you're getting ordered to do things. There's a lot of times in these investigations, your chapter P or whoever, president or whoever, they tell you to do things. You don't say, well, why?
Right.
You just do it, It's so there was a lot of that. I mean, when we were with the Vagos, again, so this was our final mud check before we were going to get patched in. It was about 2:30 in the morning. We were all out. We go over to this one guy's house, dog, and we're all it's like three. They're all fucked up, and they go, "Hey, we got to go collect." They go, "You guys want to go?" Well, that's not like. That's you're going to go. You
right.
cannot say no. So we're like, they go, yeah, we're going. They go, where are we going? They go, don't you worry where we're going. They go, we're going to take your car. We're going to take 2 trucks. Take off anything that says, that relates to the club, whatever. Go outside, mask, put something over your license plate. And I'm looking at Tony. I go, either they're playing with us or this is going to be bad. So we go do what we got to do. And then this one dude, Tree, who is an absolute asshole. He's a guy that rode around with a bike. He had a bungee thing over to hold his tanks on. Bad. Anyway, so we get in our car. I'm driving. Tony's in the front. He gets in the back. He goes, hey, you guys got any guns on you? We're like, no, which I did. I go, no, we don't have any guns. He goes, well, all I got is this 38. He goes, you don't got anything bigger? I go, nope, no, I didn't bring anything out tonight. So we drive into North Las Vegas and we go into this trailer park. There's probably 20 trailers in here, right? Now, mind you, it's about 3:00 in the morning. We pull in there, my car and 2 trucks, and they go up to the door. They don't knock, they just kick it in. Now, it's a single wide trailer, and there's like, I think 8 or 9 of us. And as soon as Tony and I, we're trying to get in the door. Once we get in the door, before we could even get in the door, they got this dude, and they are just beating the living shit out of him. Well, apparently, he didn't pay him for some meth and some other things, and he owed him. So they're beating the living hell out of him. And they're like, and they tell us, they go, pull the phones out of the wall. So we pull the cords out of the wall. And they go check the rest of the house. So, of course, what do we find? You find a 4 and a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old or so girl. And we pull them out. And all I told Tony is I said, look, I don't give a shit what happens in here. I go, they don't get near the kids. I go, fuck it at that point, right? And they never made any, but we sat and watched. The wife got up, her girlfriend, I don't know what she was. She got up and got off the couch to try to intervene because they were beating us. They knocked her over the couch. Now, this went on because they started hauling out all his motorcycle parts. They loaded his bike into the truck. This went on for about an hour. Do you think anybody called the police? Not one peep. Not one peep. That was one of the best charges we had because we got him for kidnapping, home invasion. I mean, so you know how I was talking about cover teams? I had one guy that was my cover guy, Randy. And, we were out just social. If you're doing an operation, you got, actually doing a buy, you got to get the right people out there. Well, we were just out socially. So after this is over, I'm looking at Tony. I'm going, how the hell am I going to explain this one? Because we basically did a home invasion,
right.
Of course, the one thing I want to tell you guys is, one of the things is, before you go into these cases, you have meetings with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the prosecutor's office, and you talk about what you can and cannot do. Okay. Fighting, don't throw the first punch, don't throw the last kick. Drugs, can't do drugs. We've had guys that were able to carry user amount of drugs because that's the role they played, so they could actually, give little bumps if they needed to. But it was, it wasn't anything, really crazy that you could do, right?
Right.
So, but you had those talks, when we talked about, language, whether it be swearing or, racial comments, you don't want to sound worse than the criminals, right? That's a problem because, you got to go testify. So that was all tempered and that was all approved. Well, we hadn't talked about doing a home invasion yet. Now, mind you, up until this point, Steve Martin had done the Warlocks case. I did the Brothers case, and then I rolled right into this one. I didn't even take a break, which became an issue because after 6 months into the case, I got called on the carpet, meaning up to San Francisco where our division was, and they were railing me going, "You were supposed to take a year off." I go, "I never got notified I was supposed to take a year off." They go, "You didn't get notified?" I go, "No." I go, "Tell me where that memo is."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I go, "I never got told I was taking a year off." and Gonzalez, who was Rodriguez, who was the deputy assistant over that thing, he called me. He goes, "How far are you in?" I go, "I'm 6-7 months in." He goes, "All right." He goes, "Fuck it." He goes, just keep going then. You know what I mean? So I didn't really have any break between those two cases. It went boom, boom. So, so before I called my boss, who was a putz, I called the U.S. Attorney's Office and laid it out to them because generally speaking, if the U.S. Attorney's Office is okay with it, ATF ain't going to balk.
Right.
So I called them and explained what's on. They go, "Well, other than somebody getting beat up and whatnot, anything else happen?" They go, "Just send somebody out there to take a report that something was done to go get the statement that they ended up using against it." Anyway, so when I went back and I told my boss, I go, "Hey, I already talked to the U.S. attorneys. They're good with it." He was like, "Okay, keep going then. No issues," because it was a different reporting mechanism then. But, and then that case was going on and we were going good. And that's after the Reno where we had gotten into that and we got voted in as prospect. And we'd been running back and forth for, 2-3 months, and prospect period for them back then was about 3 months. And they come up with, they're going to have an officers run down in Mexico. And it's like, so I call our attaché up in Mexico and I go, "Hey, we gotta come to," which I didn't know shit. I go, "We're going to come to Mexico." I go, "Is it okay to bring our guns?" He goes, "Yeah, you can bring your guns." He goes, "You just got to check them in at the embassy." I go, "Embassy?" I go, No. We're coming across with the club. He goes, "You can't come into Mexico with any guns." He goes, and we're like, "What's the big deal?" He goes, "Because the reporting requirements here are, if you come into Mexico as a law enforcement officer," he goes, "we have to tell the federales, the prosecutor, everybody that you're going to come in contact." He goes, "You might as well come across the border and shoot yourself in the head."
Right.
And we're like, "Okay, well, how the hell do we get around this?" So we had to start working our magic. So we put records in text that said that we had been caught smuggling and doing some other stuff that we told the club, if we go down to the border, we're going to have trouble getting back. We're not, we'll get back, but we're probably going to get arrested. So we had worked that out. And then it was, so right at the last minute, they changed it and they did the officers meeting in California. They told the informant and I, they're like, "You guys don't have to go," because they changed it last minute. They go, "They have enough prospects out there." They go, and they said, "Next week, you guys will get your patches. We'll just give them to you here." So we're like, right on. Well, they go down to this officers meeting and Darren Kozlowski goes there and he gets his patch. So he's a patch member. Okay. I think he held the patch the shortest of anybody in the history of ATF because what happened was his informant's old lady who got killed, she got pissed because ATF wasn't doing anything for her. She thought she should get some money or something. So she went to the club with his card.
Oh, shit.
Now, the fatal error, of course, we're young. Again, we're not thinking, Cause, his nickname that he used for the club was Cause. Okay. We still laugh about this till till this day. But anyway, that's what he did. Well, she gave him the business card. They start calling around. If I get this wrong, he'll correct me when I see him. They start calling around, and they found him at the Long Beach office. So they found Darren Kozlowski, ATF agent at the Long Beach office. So, Darren, like all of us, you try to scoot out, you go home, and he had a house with a garage and whatnot. So he comes back to his house. He goes in his house, and he gets a knock on the door. Junkie Ed, who was an international enforcer for the club, Sergeant Arms, he and some other members go in his house and say, "Where you been?" He goes, "What do you mean where I've been? I've been right here." They go, "No, you haven't," because they had set up surveillance on him. And they go, "What are you driving?" He goes, "I drove." I can't remember what he said he was driving. They go, "No, you weren't," because they'd broken his garage and saw what he had in there. So, because he used to park a car down around the corner, different cars, so he can come and go. Those tactics have all changed. So, so they took his patch, right? They didn't do anything to him because they're not that stupid. If they're suspecting he's an ATF agent, they're not going to do anything to him. So he calls me and he tells me what's going on. And I'm like, holy shit. The concern is, are you okay? And the second is, how the hell are we going to circumvent ATF on this one? You know what I mean? Because he's got to report back. And it wasn't like an hour later, I get this call at our undercover house in Las Vegas. And it's Junkie Ed and Tramp, who's the international president. And they're on the phone. And of course, they obviously don't think I know anything about this. So I'm on the phone and I go, "Hey, because Cherry liked us." So he'd call us and I go, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "We got a problem with your buddy." I go, "Which one?" He goes, "Cause." I go, "What's the problem?" Now, we had built a relationship with Cause, saying that we were doing business back in the Midwest prior to coming out here. So here's what he said. He goes, "I think Cause followed you out here to continue his case on. And when he saw you got in the club, he started getting around the club too, and figured he'd come and get after us." He goes, "That's a big problem." And I'm like, pretending I'm going, "Oh, fuck." I go, "Well, what do you guys, how do you propose? What are you going to do?" He goes, and then at this point, Tramp goes, "We're going to kill him." Junkie Ed goes, "I'm going to get off the phone now." So he gets off the phone. So it's just me and Terry on the phone now. And I had this whole recording. And he's telling me, he goes, "We got to do something." He goes, "I don't expect that you'll do it because you'll be the first one they look at." He goes, "But we got to do something." So they were just talking about how they were, because of course, Cause took all his stuff up and outed, but they had a starting place to look for him at his office, right? So at this point, we're like, "Oh man, I don't know, we're hit. We're going to have to take a break." So of course, I get off the phone with him. I got to make a call to my office and tell him what's going on. And I ended up calling my SAC. I didn't even talk to my boss really because he was a goof. And they're like, "Well, you guys got to shut it down." I go, "I think we're good." Of course, being optimistic, I go, "I think we could survive it. We should be able to stay. We can get rid of Cause, but we should be able to stay." They're like, "You ain't fucking staying in that investigation." So we had to go meet a couple guys that were our sponsors, and we ended up meeting them, and they hadn't even known my own chapter didn't even know what was going on at the time. And Tony and I ended up turning our cuts into them and said, "Hey, we gotta bolt out of here for a couple months till we see what's going on."
Right.
You know what I mean? And then what ended up happening, because in these investigations, you always have running affidavits from day one. We learned the hard way. So everything is going, as everything happens, the affidavit builds, the charges build. So if something like this happens, we can go right to the prosecutor with what we got, get before a grand jury, or even just get warrants issued and go ahead and take everybody down. So that's what we did. We broke out of there. And then it was like the following week, we ended up hitting Las Vegas, bunch of places in California. And there was another investigation that was going on down in San Diego. I think we ended up getting like 60 members out of that or something like that.
But you guys are clean because they track it all back to Cause, and you were just two guys associated with him who they thought was being investigated by Cause.
Fellow
and
travelers.
You just went to the wind. So you didn't get
they weren't looking at us like
Right.
we were anything bad.
Right.
But, we're stupid and naive to think that, we could stay in this investigation. We'll be clean. They just
Right.
think it's Cause.
Right.
It comes to a point where you're so invested in these investigations
Right.
that sometimes you get tunnel vision and you lose sight. But that's why we always had guys. There was a peer support program in ATF, but it was guys that had did these types of investigations.
Yeah.
Because Steve Martin happened to be a supervisor up in San Francisco at the time who had done those other things. So obviously he came down and talked to me and smacked me around a little bit and gave me my common sense back and said, Frank, you can't, you can't stay in, you got to go. And then I didn't even think I had to move, but then my house, my tires got slashed on my G car. And then there were a couple of Vagos who were hanging around a building. And then of course, ATF lost its mind on there, you know?
Right.
So that's where it was. So what's going to happen to me now? So I'm talking to my wife. Of course. Okay. So if you guys don't know me, I'm a big Beagle fan. We've had Beagles for 30 plus years. I got 3 of them now. We had 2 then. And they're going, you guys, you got to go out of your house and stay in a hotel until we can move you. That lasted 1 night. And we went back to the house. I told my wife, I'd rather take my chance with the dogs being at the house. I got guns.
Yeah.
And the thing is, odds are, I'm not going to say they wouldn't do anything because there are some Looney Tunes and whatnot, but they know that if they really did something like that,
They don't want
that
that federal.
Right.
That
it would
federal
come back.
heat, yeah.
The blowback would be tremendous, right? I mean, that doesn't help me or my wife at the time. We didn't have any kids, but so anyway, so you know, ATF being ATF, I had no desire. Headquarters was the least place I wanted to be. Now, at the time, John Cooper, who's a very dear friend of mine, when our case was having problems, he gets sent out from our Special Operations Division with another guy, Pete McCarthy, to talk to us about the issues. And we rail into him. And it's like, God damn, you guys, you just suck. And it wasn't even his fault because he just got there. So when the case busted up, they said, okay, pick places you want to go. I said, okay, well, I like to go to the Midwest or to the South or whatever. And I picked my 4 locations. They said, okay, and write up a justification letter. So I did. They said, okay, you'll go to one of those 4 places. The next morning I go in the office about 6 o'clock and there's a teletype that I've been transferred to headquarters to go work in our new undercover shop. I was not a happy camper, not a happy camper at all. However, it's one of the best things I ever did because Coop had worked undercover. There was me, another guy, Craig Carradine, great, another undercover agent, Al Phoenix. So they were bringing guys into the branch who actually worked undercover and understood what was needed to get this thing off the ground. So I spent, 2 years up there learning about that whole process and getting integrated with everybody else who was doing it, whether it was, every part of the government really.
Right.
And then I was ready to go. Now, in the meantime, my wife and I was fine with the Beagles. My wife wanted kids. So we ended up going to Russia and adopted a couple kids too at the same time. So I'm getting ready to push out. And I had a good relationship with a couple of the deputy assistant directors who had been my SACs. And I go, well, this is where I want to go. And the one, Malcolm Brady, really great guy. He goes, no. He goes, you're going to go be the supervisor in Youngstown in your hometown. I go, I really don't want to do that, Malcolm. He goes, well, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to do it or I'm going to fuck you. He goes, I'm going to put you somewhere you don't want to be. And I go, well, that's not nice, Malcolm. So I didn't even put in for the job. You have to put in for the job. I didn't get it put in for the job. I went for an interview. I had my interview. And then after the Tate he was the SAC of New Orleans. I had my interview. 2 minutes later, he goes, Frank, congratulations. You're going to Youngstown. I go, God almighty. So, which was good. I went to Youngstown and, that got me to Youngstown and I was there for 5 years. And then that's how we rolled into the Aryan Brotherhood case.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, that sounds like a pretty crazy one. How did that start to come about for on your end?
So, there were Tom Doyle and a couple guys up at East Lake Police Department in Lake County. The Hells Angels have been operating in Cleveland, and they had opened up a new chapter up in Lake East, they called it. And and they'd always been involved in something, right? Well, and there were some Aryan Brotherhood members that they had been dealing with up there who were manufacturing machine guns. When I talk about people having no redeeming quality, this guy had no redeeming quality. AJ Bloomquist, just total whack job. So they say, hey, so they called me, they said, hey, we got like 4 or 5 informants. Would you be willing to come up here and interview them? And then we'll go from there. If there's something that you guys think you want to do, being ATF, right? So we go up and interview, and we find 2 guys. Now, they didn't know each other. One was going to be, he was going to work on the Cleveland chapter of the HA, and we had a captain in the Aryan Brotherhood who they had gotten out. He almost beat a guy to death in a bar, but he wanted to cooperate, right? He was a captain in the state of Ohio. So we went up and we talked. Now, I was a supervisor, right? Now, at that point, when you're a 14 or a group supervisor or RAC, whatever, you're not supposed to work undercover. You're supposed to oversee the crap, right? Well, I had a really good SAC that I know, Chris Sadowski. He let me do a lot of things that a lot of bosses were never allowed to do, because he let me go help out on Jay Dobbins' case. He let me go help on a couple of the Warlocks case, all these cases that I was able to go play with, and which was nice. And so we're going to start this investigation, and we're going to buy we're going to go meet AJ, because he can make machine gun Stens. He was manufacturing them. So we get it all together, and we're going to go meet at this bar in Cleveland. And so we show up, and I bring in another undercover from Virginia, Jeff Grabman, and he's going to be the guy that gets introduced. Well, I didn't dress like anything. So we're talking, and so I'm introducing him to Jeff, and I go, he's going to go with you. And he goes, that won't work. I go, what do you mean it won't work? And this is where informants, some people call them confidential human sources. We just call them informants, He goes, he won't do. I go, why? He goes, because I described you. I told him about you. And of course, I'm looking at him, and I go, his name was Fred. I go, Fred, what'd you tell him? He goes, well, I told him your name was Junkyard. I got saddled with that for almost a year and a half. I go, what the fuck? Junkyard? He goes, yeah. I go, well, what else did you tell him? Well, that you did time with my dad in county. Okay, so that's how we know each other. I go, okay. And I go, and what else did you tell him? He goes, that you and my dad would go into bars and you would wrestle bears for fun. I'm like, you're an idiot, right? So we're sitting there, and so I'm looking at Jeff. I go, well, you're going. So I have to call my boss. I called my boss, and I go, hey, here's the situation. I go, I got to go to this meeting, because if I don't go, it's not going to go anywhere. He goes, all right, well, just go to the first meeting and back out. Mm-hmm. Well, 18 months later, there was no backing out, because AJ, although he liked Jet, he loved me. He just took a real liking to me. I got a phone call from that guy, 7 o'clock every morning. I had to be up and ready to record him, because it was like clockwork. He had a construction. It was called AB Construction. Very ingenious. And he would employ on the books all of the ABs that were getting out on parole. Now, Tim Miracle, who was the adult parole officer for Ohio, he had all these guys on probation and parole, so he knew all of them and what they were about.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get into this negotiation with AJ about machine guns. So he won't get the kits. I had to get the kits. I give him the 3 machine gun kits at first. He makes them in 3 days, come back, beautiful powder coated, function, perfect. So I said, well, let's see what he can do. So I said, I'm going to order 10. And of course, the U.S. Attorney's Office, well, how do you know he's going to give them to you and he wants to? I go, because these guys don't operate like that. I go, it's a bond. Money. If they tell you they're going to do something, they're going to do it.
Right.
So we go, and I get him 10 kits, and about a week later, he brings them to me, right? And he brings me 9, and then he says, and then he goes, well, let's go back to my office. He goes, I want to talk to you guys about something anyway. So I go, well, where's the 10th one? He goes, I'll show you. So we go back, and he goes in the back room, and he pulls out this stem that he had powder coated pink, and he put these little powder puff girls all over it as a joke. He goes, man, I was just joking around. If you want, I'll powder coat it black. I go, oh, no. I go, I'll take that one. That's kind of cool. because that's great jury appeal. I mean,
Right.
you know what I mean? Look at this idiot. He don't even care. He's making guns that are pink with powder puff girls on them. That's what his disregard. Well, AJ had ties into cops who were running information for him, that were selling him body armor. I mean, this dude, he was a captain in Aryan Brotherhood too. Criminal, pure criminal. A lot of identity theft, robbery, you name it, he was into it. He was married to a nurse, trapped. He had a kid who, as we got around him, the kid ate Cheetos and Coke. That's all he ate. And he named him Dietrich Adolf Blomquist. Real treat, right?
Yeah.
So this starts to go. Well, while we're in there, we go up and we're buying some dope off him. So he pulls in, he goes, "Hey man, you guys ride motorcycles?" and at this point, I'm like, oh shit. I go, the ears go, "Beep." And I go, "Yeah, we ride motorcycles. Why? What do you think?" And he goes, "Well, listen, the Aryan Brotherhood has been trying to develop a club nationally for years." He goes, and we got enough guys out right now that we're poised to do this. I go, "No shit." He goes, "And we're going to start it here in Ohio." I go, "So what do you need from me?" He goes, "You got 5 guys?" He goes, "I got 5 guys." I can get 5 guys. I go, "I got 5 guys I know." And I'm committing before I could even do anything, but we're going to ride motorcycles. So, hey. And I said, "Well, what's the objective here, AJ? I go, what are we doing?" He goes, "Well, the objective is for us to kill the Hells Angels and take over Northeast Ohio." I go, "That's a great plan." So, we break. I mean, it's perfect because, see, the thing is, people don't know about ATF or really don't understand about ATF is a lot of law enforcement agencies, when you talk about there's going to be guns there and these guys have a real potential for violence, a lot of agencies back off of that.
Uh-huh.
ATF, the more guns, the more violent criminal you are, that's our wheelhouse. We want you to have guns there. We want you to be violent because that gives us our whole crux to being there. Because we used to get in these arguments with ATF about, well, you're buying all kind of dope. We don't see a lot of guns. Dudes, they're carrying them. Most crooks won't get off the gun that they're using to defend themselves. They got smart. They learned.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I go back and I talk to my SAC, Chris, and I say, "Here's what's going on." I go, and I'm going to have to be in it because he's expecting me, because they're going to run this like a AB council.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have members and whatnot. So it was like, man, I got 5 guys, and my very, very dear friend, Freddie Rains, was the only state and local guy who I just said, "Fred, you want to work some undercover with us?" And he was like, he had no idea what he was getting into, none. So, but that guy could buy dope off a rock. And, so we started down this road, right? We started getting to know each other. So we had like on St. Patrick's Day, we're going to bring our 5 guys and they're going to bring their 5 guys to a bar. So we bring our 5 guys in and we're talking to their 5 guys, and we have no idea who these guys are. They introduce us to themselves and we spend a good amount of time there and we leave. So we go get debriefed by Tim Miracle and the task force guys, because we had formed a task force up there. And Tim goes, "Do you guys know who you met with?" I go, one guy named David, another guy, JB. He goes, "Dude, David is the head of the AB for the state of Ohio. He brought it back from Phoenix." He goes, "He just got out like 6 months ago for 6 counts of attempted murder. And he killed a guy in jail and stabbed a guy and shot a guy. But they always kept running this stuff concurrent. He's dead now. He got his head about sawed off out in Victorville in federal penitentiary by the ABs because they thought he was stealing." But anyway, so we meet these guys, and it's like, these guys, JB, 25 years for murder. Paulie, he got hit for hauling dope between Oklahoma, and he got Motor, he was robbery, whatever. All these guys had bought, which was right. I mean, it was right where we wanted to be. It was like, this couldn't get any better, right? Now, our thought was, how do we control the beast, without getting in too much shit with these guys, right? Well, so on Hitler's birthday, on April 20th, that's when we had our coming out party. And the club was called the Order of Blood. And it's like, okay, which I didn't know anything about this. We're getting this whole historical, when Hitler went to prison and all his generals and our officers that came out, he gave them this medal, the Order of Blood. So that's where our patch came from. That's where the name of our club came from. So while they're designing the patch, this always makes me laugh. So it was an eagle, right? and it had two Thunderbolts on the back of it, an eagle, like the AB Falcon eagle. And then I'm like, well, why don't we just use a swastika? They're like, well, that would just draw too much attention. But on the front of our cuts, we had a big swastika, support your local. Couldn't make it up, right? So these guys, so anyway, so we just start rolling with these guys. We came out and, you know, people don't understand the underground. So our first coming out party with these guys, we were up in Ohio, and it was a Hells Angels event. And this is where we're going to sell all our Nazi gear, you know, our swastikas, our club support stuff, right? Our Thunderbolts. And so we're there. The Hells Angels have their tent. And in fact, I think Sonny Barger was coming in to sign books. So there was a bunch of them there. And the caveat that, so in Ohio, up in Northeast Ohio, there weren't supposed to be any new clubs that started, right? They're like, that's it. No new clubs. Well, couple of the AB were friends with the Hells Angels. They knew them. They didn't trust them. Nobody trusted each other. So I get invited to this meeting with the informant in AJ, and then there's two Hells Angels there. And we go to this Denny's, and we're sitting there. And, you know, most clubs will kiss their ass just because they fear them.
Right.
Well, we're sitting there, and they tell them, hey, we're starting a club. And they go, what club? They go, an AB club. And they go, well, you know, we're not supposed to start. They go, we don't give a shit what you say. We're starting a club. And this is the first time. This is why it was so great to be in this. You didn't care what the club said because your gang was a prison gang.
Right.
And they knew it. They knew it. And I'll tell you a story that drove that point home to the Hells Angels real quick. So they're like, okay, you know, just all right. They didn't balk. So we started the club, and then we showed up at that event. You know, their Hells Angels they knew we were coming. But anyway, that ain't even the best part is we're there about a half hour to an hour. Next thing you know, we got the Grand Wizard. We got a couple Nighthawks. We got the Grand Dragon from the clan. They're all coming up. Welcome, brothers. We're you know, good to see you. You know, it's so good to see other people like us out here. And we're like, I'm telling you right now, if they'd have let us go about another 6 months in that investigation, we'd have had our sheets inside that. No doubt in my mind. No doubt. Because, you know, because people don't, you know, a lot of the old school, the clubs, you know, a lot of it is about white supremacy.
Right.
I mean, they've gotten away from that. Like the Hells Angels, you know, they used to wear a lot of things were swastikas, Thunderbolts. And then once Germany came in, they couldn't wear that anymore. They get fined. However, they were buying our stuff and not getting caught wearing it. That's like a lot of clubs, you know, they'll wear the symbol, you know, because it stands for supremacy, whatever. It was odd to see Hispanics wearing it, but okay. But anyway, so, you know, as time went on, we had a really good relationship with both Cleveland chapters. But as we grew as a club, we started to get more powerful because people started to recognize we weren't subservient, we didn't answer, and that we truly were, you know, you guys, because all our records showed that we were criminals for the most part. Now, we kept a couple guys that were clean just for throwdowns. And if you want to hear a funny story, I'll tell you this one. So, you know how you think you're smarter than the average bear?
Yeah.
So we had been preparing to do this case for like 3-4 months, because at the pinnacle of this case, we had 20 undercovers running, male and female. Okay. So we started out with 5. So we had to get all that down, right? So we had seized this Fleetwood Cadillac, and it was an older one, but it was nice. So that was my car because I was supposed to be the guy, right? So we're getting ready to go up to our house, and we had a big safe up there and everything where we would store stuff because we had guys flying in from all over. But I had just picked a bunch of guys up. Well, I picked 3 of them up in Pittsburgh. So we're going to our house. We had dropped a couple bikes off that we had purchased to get some work done. Okay. So it's like October. It's going into November. And so it was getting late in the day, and we're going up to Cleveland. Now, it's like if we go to the house to drop off all our stuff, because some guys had creds in their computers because we had to do our work, we were going to stash them and say, if we went to the house and then had to go to the west side of Cleveland, it's like an extra 2 hours to get the bikes. So it was getting late, and we're like, okay, who's in favor of going to the house? Everybody's like, no, let's just go get the bikes and be done with it. And I had like $5,000 I had to pay to pick them up with the work that was done. So we break from our route and we're going down Route 90. Now there's me, I had long hair and a big beard. Everybody else shaved like this, shaved head, beard. And we're in a Fleetwood Cadillac. And we're driving. And we're going traffic. It's traffic. I think the speed limit was 7. We were going like 75, 76. And there's an interdiction team sitting off on the left that nobody told us that they hang out over there. That's just poor intelligence on our part. We pass this interdiction team and we all look at them and they look at us. I go, we are hit bigger than shit. As soon as we pass them, boom, 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 they come out. There's 3 of them. They pull up behind us. They pull me over. And of course, now we're in roll. So now I got to be the asshole. So the one officer walks up to the side and he hits on the window. He said, roll your window down. So I roll it down like an inch. I go, can I help you? He goes, well, do you know why I stopped you? I wasn't speeding. He goes, yeah, you were speeding. I go, I was keeping with the flow of traffic, dude. I go, that wasn't speeding. He goes, roll the window down. So I roll the window down. And as I'm rolling the window down, and I go, and no, you cannot have consent to search the car. So he looks right at me like, okay, we're going to play this game. Now, remember how I said we had a throwdown guy?
Yeah.
So Wayne Lester, who was a newer agent, who we had to bring guys in because we just had a shortage of guys, right? Who had capability, but never been in this kind of situation. So Wayne didn't have a criminal history. Now, prior to getting into the car, I said, okay, does everybody have their guns in the trunk and in their bag? So if we get stopped, we're not going to have a problem. Yes. So as soon as we get pulled over, Jeff Graham goes, fuck, I got my gun. I go, all right. I go, take the magazine, throw it in the front, throw it in the glove box, throw the gun under the seat. Because in Ohio, that's just a simple improper handling of a firearm, right? So the guy's going, I go, and you can't have consent to search. So they come over and they pull us out of the car. And so they put me and Wayne in a car, and they put Jeff and Dan Oswald in the other car. And Wayne's looking at me and goes, what's going on? I go, well, if somebody's going to jail for that gun, it's you, because you don't have a criminal history. So the rest of us are, 2-3 time felons. I go, so you're going to have to take the hit. And Wayne's like, what? I go, yeah, if they don't give you a simple, you're going to have to own the gun. If they ask whose gun that is, it's yours. So they bring out the drug dog, right? Now, we had cleaned this car. There's nothing going to hit on this car. So they walked the dog around the car once. Nothing. I go, good, dude, we're out of here. Nothing. They walked the dog around the car a second time. That officer put his hand on the window ledge. Dog sat. Because I have an alert. I go, son of a bitch. Passive alert. He got alert my ass, right? So now they're going to get in the car. They get in the front seat within, a minute. I got a gun. So now, mind you, this is the first day out on this investigation. We spent quite a bit of money getting. I'm going, you can't believe it, right? So we're supposed to be better than this because Dan's worked the case, I worked the case, Jeff's worked multiple cases. We should know better, right? So I sit there and I say, Wayne, I'm going to have to out myself. He goes, what do you mean out yourself? I go, I'm going to have to out myself to protect the case. He goes, what are you going to do? I go, don't worry about it. So I start banging my head on the window of this cruiser, right? So sergeant's like yelling at me, shut up, stop it. So I'm about beating myself unconscious. Finally officer goes, what the fuck do you want? I go, I need to talk to you. So he pulls me out. I go, can we go to the back of the car? So he goes, what's going on? I go, all right, well, I'm going to explain something to you. I go, might be a little bit sketchy for you to believe. I go, but I'm going to lay something down to you. I go, I'm an ATF agent. I go, and these guys are my targets. I go, and right now you're fucking up my deal. And he's looking at me, and I go, okay, if you want to verify who I am, I go, I got a bag in the back of that car. I go, this is the bag, and inside it, there's a compartment that you got to, pull some shit apart and get into. I go, my creds are in there. He goes, he's looking at me. I go, but you are the only one that could search that, because if these other guys, it's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. So he goes in there, and I could see him messing around. He pulls my Kreza, he looks, he shuts him. Now, mind you, while we're on the side of the road, about 3 or 4 more cruisers show up. I'm watching our seats get launched out of our car because they're tearing it apart, right? So he goes, well, how do you want to handle this? Now, at this point, the lieutenants that were on our task force, they both show up. And he goes, well, what do you want to do about the gun? I go, that little dude back there that's in the car with me, I go, just give him an improper handling. He don't have a criminal history. I go, the other guys, just let him go for right now. And he's like real cool about it. He goes, okay, all right. So anyway, long story short, after 3 hours on the side of the road, our cars all, they're like, okay, they're wrapping up. And then like, okay, we got to put our seats back in. We got to, okay. So we get back in the car. And after something traumatic like that, the speed limit was 70. I think I was going 40. Because we're all looking at each other like, we're supposed to be so much better than this. And
yeah.
this is day one. So I'm driving down the road. Car comes flying up behind me, lights me up. I'm going, you got to be shit. I mean, I'm like, I might as well let's just quit right now. Pulls me over. It's the sergeant. And they never said a word about me, and the case went on. I mean, I give them that credit. They never said a word to anybody about me. But he comes up, he goes, you forgot this. And he hands me my $5,000 that I forgot that he even took off me when he searched me. I became so tunnel visioned.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I'm like, God almighty. So we pick up the bikes. Now it's dark and it's cold. So the other guys take off in a car, and we put all our gear on and our cuts on now. Now we've got our, and we start rolling down the same road, right? We're on 2 bikes. Now our face are all messed up. We got helmets on. Dude, we passed the same interdiction unit. They're out right behind us. The sergeant, because he must have not, he rolls up and he's looking at us, and I'm on the inside, just on it. I pull my mask down, and I'm like, as if to say, for real? Come on. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they backed out and they went. I mean, you want to talk about a night of just self-reflection, just like, dudes, everything that could have went wrong. It did, which woke us up, because that case was different than any other case I went, because those guys scrutinized. They had security guys. They wanted to know everything about you. They were constantly looking at guys getting out of prison. If they made deals, you're allowed to talk to this one, don't talk to that one. So as we started off actually our house was in Geneva on the lake. And then it was beautiful. It overlooked the lake. It was a big house. We all kind of lived there, came and went, and we kind of expanded into a couple cities. But the chapters started to grow. We started to get more members. As guys got out of prison, guys were bringing in people from prison. So it was, a lot of dope. And the one good thing about it is so we had this house, right? And it had a big flagpole. So it's like, there was no secret who we were, right? Bunch of Nazis. So we flew a Nazi flag. My boss rode by there one time just to check the house out. I get a call. He goes, you got to take that flag down. I go, why? He goes, you got to take the flag down. He goes, it's a Nazi flag. I go, we're Nazis. I go, that's what we are. Right. He goes, no. He goes, it's too much. So we ended up flying a pirate flag instead. However, all those people up in that area, we had people, I'm not shitting you, people would just knock on our door. Because we'd be outside, everybody's tattooed, washing bikes. People would just knock on our door asking if we want to buy dope and guns. We had these 2 idiots that worked for the city, those big steel manhole covers. Mm-hmm. It was like Jeremiah Johnson. They would drop stuff off at our house with the big swastikas or thunderbolts on them. And then they would drop off these manhole covers, right? So one of the guys ends up asking, goes, hey, man, where are you getting these? They go, well, we're just pulling them off the street. He's like, so you're leaving big holes on the street where we ride our motorcycles? You idiot. But there were councilmen that would stop up and talk to us. You would think, in today's age, you talk about racism. People just don't know how much racism exists still today. Where people, we used to sell our gear. People would buy our gear tenfold. We had guys that were buying off of some black guys. So we had a tent that these guys would give us on the main street of Geneva on the Lake. I roll up with one of the other guys, and I see two of our guys standing there who are buying dope off a black guy. He's wearing our AV support shirt. I walked up, they're laughing. I go, dude, you better get that off. I said, because if David Snow shows up over here, he'll kill that motherfucker. I go, you guys, this isn't, I go, serious business. They're not gonna laugh at that, right? So anyway, but we had people that were buying and wearing our stuff all over the place. I mean, we had clubs when they got in trouble, they would call us to help defend them or work things out for them. And this is over time. We got to be pretty good friends with a guy named, he's out of the club now because of our friendship, Willie Beard, who was in the Hells Angels, and he took to us. And he said, hey, you guys run your operations good. You do stuff the right way. He goes, you guys aren't any bullshit. You handle your business. And we did. There were times where things would come up to where we would have to handle our business, where guys would try, test us, and then it was on. And it was over quickly, because we had a lot of big dudes in our club, and it was, it would get contentious because, we had the Pagans. We would go to Pagan territory. They're like, well, you guys are up in Northeast Ohio. How can you have no affiliation with the Hells Angels? We don't. In fact, one of the original council members for the Aryan Brotherhood was a Pagan. So we ended up getting real good with the Pagans. We had some affiliation with the Outlaws. And we also had affiliations with all the other clubs that were up and around in that area. So we ended up having guys in Akron, up in Geneva on the Lake, and then over in Sharon, Pennsylvania. So we had 3 chapters by the time, and this thing was ballooning up. We had guys calling from the penitentiary that were calling, asking us to join, when we get out, So, I mean, and they were and the beauty of it was they were all great violent targets. We had this one guy. There's some twist to this story that. So, if you got the time for this,
yeah.
JB, who was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, right? He went down for murder. Okay, he was actually, and we knew this, but he didn't know we knew this. He was actually an informant for Tim Miracle, who was the adult parole officer, right? So while this case is going on, he's informing, but guess who he's informing on? Only us. None of the other ABs, not David, because he was deathly afraid of David, right? Everybody was. We were deathly afraid of David. Look at David. He didn't look like much, but cuckoo. Anyway, so John Beeson's starting to get too powerful. He's starting to want to do too many things. It's going to get us down a road we don't want to go. So it's like, so how do we get rid of him? Because we had to get rid of AJ too. And I'll tell you how we got rid of him. This was before JB, but so JB had showed some of the guys in the club that he had a gun, right? So based on that, they executed a search warrant and they sealed the warrant and they arrested him. Okay. So JB had a bad heart. So he goes because he's going for parole revocation now because he's out on parole, and now he's facing federal charges. Well, he gets charged in federal court, and his attorney in open court says that he's an active informant because ATF signed him up too.
Oh, man.
He's an active informant for ATF and the Adult Parole Authority, informing on the Hells Angels and the Aryan Brotherhood. Now, I get this information. It's like, woohoo, we can get rid of him. So I call the U.S. Attorney's Office. I go, are we allowed to put that out? They go, no. Because if you guys put it out and something happens to him, then we're liable.
Right.
I go, well, what if I direct some people to go get a copy of the transcript and they read it? They go, you can do that because it's public information. So I did. So I had Paulie and David Snow go get the transcript. So they called me on the way back from the courthouse in Cleveland, and David straight out, he goes, that motherfucker's dead. He goes, he's a snitch. He's a rat. Now Paulie and him were real good friends, meaning JB. Paulie said, we don't know the whole story. He goes, fuck him. He goes, he's dead.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, yeah. Well, anyway, so needless to say, so JB gets locked up, right? And about 2 weeks later, he's dead. Not from anything we did, but because his heart gave out.
Oh, wow.
However, though, so in the meantime, once it was public, I was able to call Willie Beard and said, hey, Willie, there's a problem with JB, blah, blah, blah. He goes, all right, well, let me know what you find out. So JB dies in prison. Well, to our advantage, I call up Willie and I go, Willie, I said, we don't have to worry about JB anymore. He goes, huh? I go, he's gone. He goes, oh, got to go. So now these sons of bitches think that we had him off them, which gives us so much credibility.
Right,
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's awesome, right? We had a lot of things go our way that way. We just kept mounting because at first when we were in this club, it was like, well, everybody had to be like a criminal that did 5 years. Then it was a violent crime. Then it was murder. This was self-perpetuating within the other clubs, not us. We weren't putting this stuff out. So, and the way we got rid of AJ was AJ again. So in his infinite wisdom, the guy that was actually the informant for the Hells Angels, they decide to go down to a Hells Angels bar in East Cleveland, and AJ does a burnout in their bar, which angers them, right?
Yeah.
So the next, as it should, and the next day there's these drag races, right? Now it's a heavy Hells Angels presence. We're going. So we had a bunch of guys. We probably had 10 or 12 guys at that point go with us. I mean, everybody went. So, and AJ drove his truck because at this point we got to do something because the Hells Angels want to kill him. They literally want to kill because they know AJ. So we pull into this event and there's Hells Angels posted all over the place, right? And so we roll in, and so it's me, JB, and David Snow. Now, David Snow never took an officer position at all. It was me, JB, and AJ at the time. So AJ was kind of out at this point. So David goes, he goes, hey, everywhere you see Hells Angel, you guys go post up. He goes, everybody got a gun? Yeah, go post up. So our guys finagled out and we're posted up next to their guys. So Johnny Merchant, who is just this big animal, and Face, they're standing over there. So I go over with JB and we're talking, and JB and Merchant's like, where's AJ? We're going to kick his ass. We're going to kick his ass. And now all these guys, nobody's young. You know, everybody's over 40 years old, approaching 50.
Yeah.
You know, in this stuff. So it's like children. Anyway, so JB goes, you're not touching anybody in our club. I go, if there's anybody going to be disciplined in them, it'll be us. What's the problem? So he told him what was going on. He goes, all right. He goes, all right. He goes, we want AJ. We're going to, he goes, and JB goes, just stand by. He goes, Junkyard, come with me. So we go back and David's standing over there. Now, okay, so just a little background on David. David got convicted of 6 counts of attempted murder because he held his girlfriend and was playing Russian roulette before somebody escaped out of the house, called the police, right? He got 15 years. He came up for parole in 8. When he went before the parole board, he told him, fuck you. I'm not telling you I'm sorry or anything. So they sent him to the Youngstown max security prison where he orchestrated the Lucasville riots from there. While he was in prison, we got from the guys that we talked to, the security guys that work at the prisons, he stabbed the guy. He actually shot a guy in the head, but he didn't die. But they ran everything concurrent. When he got out of prison, now this is JB and I'm saying, he was living under his mother's trailer because he was in solitary 23 hours a day. Like, you couldn't go through a drive-through because he goes, I'm not talking to the box. I mean, and when he first came around, this dude, he spent most of his, teenage years dry cleaning. So he would wear Dockers and polos and the worst tattoos you ever seen in your life. He was balding, thin, but just violent as hell. But you'd never know that if you just talked to him and met him. Seemed like half-assed normal guy. So we go back over and we're talking to David, and David goes, all right, here's how it's going to go. He goes, you go back and tell them motherfuckers. He goes, if they touch one of us, he goes, we will greenlight every Hell's Angel across the country. At that point, I've been in other clubs and I've been around other clubs. I've never felt that much power in my life. Yeah. That we're going to go over there and tell them this. And it was, okay, I go, JB, that's your call. So we walk over there and they're, and they know who David is. And JB said, I just got one message to pass to you. He goes, David said, if you touch one of our members, we're going to green light all of your people across the country. They looked at us, you saw their faces, everything changed immediately because they knew he had that power.
Right.
You know, or he could get to those people who had that power.
Right.
You know. And so things kind of changed, you know, the format changed. And then, you know, they were having an officers meeting. This is where we were kind of going to be seen by all the other clubs. So we had these things called death marches because we never knew how they were going to turn out. It's just, you had to go do it because that's what was required. So usually it's only a couple, 2 or 3 members that are allowed to go. Usually the officers that go to these things, and then the Hells Angels lecture you and tell you how they're going to extort you for all their events that you have to prepay for and everything, right? So I'm sitting there and Face goes, hey, we're going to have this thing down here. I go, hey man, none of our guys have ever been to any of this. I go, you mind if we come? Like I bring more? He goes, yeah, bring whoever you want, which saved our ass. So we go down this long road, and of course our cover team's watching the drag races. They're not watching us. Yee. So we go down this long path, and there's this tent, right? So all the other clubs are sitting there, and there's probably like 6 or 7 of us. And they're saying, hey, this is a new club, Order of Blood, and a couple of the clubs trip up and say, hey, we thought you said there wasn't going to be any new clubs. They say, shut the fuck up. They're here. And then they kind of started to figure out what we were about, right? So this meeting breaks up. Now, Roy Bootser was the longest prospect in the history of the Hells Angels. I think he prospected for 3 years. That's a long time. So they asked us to stay back. There were 2 or 3 other Hells Angels and this prospect, Roy Bootser. So they asked us to hang back and we're talking. So I'm looking out of the corner of my eye and Roy's putting on these SAP gloves. He's turning his sawed-off shotgun towards us. And I'm like, so I bump a couple of guys and go, are you guys seeing this bullshit? So it was like we close ranks into the Hells Angels because it's like if he's going to shoot one of us, he's got to shoot them, right? And JB didn't see it. He goes, what's going on? I go, I ain't got time to explain. I go, close it up. So they start talking about what needs to happen and how we have to send some guys down to the HA bar so that they can apologize, which David was vehemently against. But we're like, David, we got to exist here. We'll take care of that business. Let them, we're kind of big because the plan was, again, to kill all of them. So it's like, hey, let's just think they're in control. We're kind of guiding David. Let them think we're in control. So, and then let them go apologize. So 2 guys went down there and apologized. So they couldn't do anything because we had closed ranks around our guys. So they just broke it up. So as we're walking back up the hill, JB looks at me and goes, what the hell was that all about? I go, dude, they were getting ready to shoot us with that shotgun. He goes, what? I go, yeah. So I told my guys, I go, we're going to kill everybody here that's not wearing our patch and we're dropping our shit and getting out of here. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, he goes, Junkyard? He goes, I only got one problem with that. And I go, what is it? He goes, you need to fucking tell me that when you're going to do shit like that. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'm telling you now. He goes, because they didn't care. It was like, if, the patch was something that was just a novelty for them,
right,
to be able to ride around and be a club.
Right.
But the brand, the AB brand is what kept them together.
Right,
it's what kept all of us together because we were the only guys that were part of an AB thing that never really went through the whole process of becoming an AB inside the joint.
Right.
Which was unique in and of itself. I mean, they took pictures of us and sent them inside the joint to see if anybody knew us or anything like that. But, we were pretty much on equal standing with those guys. So, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious because, you're talking about a very interesting dynamic here, right? You're talking about the Hells Angels and the Pagans and these motorcycle gangs who their guys sometimes get sent to prison. And when they do get sent to prison, I imagine generally have to rely on the Aryan Brotherhood, which isn't a motorcycle gang. It's a prison gang that, it's a major protective and a violent force inside a prison. So now all of a sudden the Aryan Brotherhood they're sort of outside the law when it comes to these motorcycle gangs, right? Like they have a way more reach than a lot of these motorcycle gangs do.
Well, so, every time you go into a club, you learn their background, their history, right? Mm-hmm. So of course, the Aryan Brother is going to tell you, at least like the Aryan Brother in Ohio was brought from Arizona. That's where David brought it back from, right? So, and Arizona started from California. So you're going to learn the lore of that. Mm-hmm. And so we were talking to David about that because he did not like the Hells Angels. He hated them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, David, what's the rub? He goes, it goes back to the riots in the 60s. He goes, when we were riding with the blacks, he used another term, right? He goes, we went to the Hells Angels, to see if they were with us. And they said, no, we're not white, we're Hells Angels. Mm-hmm. And to this day, that carries. Like, they remember that. So like in federal prison, they're okay. State prison, they keep them away. Now, most clubs don't allow you to become an Aryan Brotherhood member and be in a club, right? Aryan Brother don't care if you're in a club or not, you know what I mean? But the clubs don't want you, because what happens is it's divided loyalty then, and who has the bigger stick. Now, we got taught a lot about the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, we were buying off of guys. We bought off of black. We bought off of the Mexican mafia. We bought anybody because the color was green, right? If it was green and we could make money. So, when you look at the hierarchy of white supremacists, right, you have the true believers. But the Aryan Brotherhood is more, it's a prison gang. When they're out, they're cliquish, they do stuff, but it's all about pushing money back into the prison to help those guys. It's not like, NSM and, war, all these other, white nationalists. It's not about that. They're all based on an ideology, based on religion. The Aryan Brotherhood is not based on like Christian religion. It's not based on that at all. So it's based on white is right. It's our group of guys. We hold the power, right? So when David made that statement to them, it kind of changed everything from the Lake East guys are like, hey, these guys are good, and in the Cleveland chapter, we started to get rubs with, because they saw a power shift and dynamic where a lot of the other puppet clubs, the smaller support clubs, were looking to us. And we were real good about that. We'd go to their events. We'd pony up a bunch of money. We were buying loyalty. I'll tell you a quick story. So they used to have these officer meetings, right? And there had been some friction with us in a couple clubs, especially with the Hells Angels. And it was coming to a head. So we're riding to this Earth Dogs was the name of this club. They got a real small clubhouse, but we're going to go over to the Born Free. Now, they were a single chapter club, but they had a lot of members, like 40 members. And we had become pretty tight with those guys. So we were going to go over to their clubhouse first and then ride over together. Well, while we're riding over there was 4 of us. There was 4 of us. Well, there's a pack coming towards us. And we're like, well, who the fuck is that? Well, it was the Hells Angels. They had like 8 members and like 2 or 3 prospects. And I'm like, something's fucked up. That ain't right. They never bring that many people to these things. So we get over to the Born Free Clubhouse, and we walk in, and Too Tall's the president, real nice guy. And we have become real good friends with some of their guys. And Too Tall goes, somebody's fixing to get fucked up. And we're like, us? He goes, that's the way it looks. He goes, dude, I don't know. He goes, the Hells Angels got to rub with you guys. And I go, over what? He goes, well, the swordsmen were saying you guys were in their territory selling dope. I go, we don't even go over there. What the fuck are they talking about? That is a puppet club for them, for the Angels. So we're getting ready to leave. But this is how much loyalty these guys had for us. They go, look, if you want, they go, we'll invite the Hells Angels back to our clubhouse. And he goes, we'll hide in the closets with shotguns and shit. And when they come in, we'll kill them all. We're like, all right, fucking sounds like a good plan. Because at this point, it's self-preservation. If that's what it comes back to, that's what it comes down to. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? I want to go home and see my family.
Right.
So we go over to this Earth Dog clubhouse, and, we go in, and they're, reading the riot act, and they're telling they want everybody's social security numbers and this and that so they could start checking everybody. But they really wanted to check us. And myself and Graham are in there, and we're saying out loud, because we're just defiant. You go, we're not giving you our shit. We're not giving you anything. And like the other clubs are like, it's like being in 3rd grade where you bark at the teacher, and the other clubs are like looking around going, holy shit. And then they're like, and there's not to be any, shit go down while we're here. So if you got a problem with another club, you handle it. So of course we did the exact opposite. So when the meeting broke up, the president of the swordsman was walking towards the bonfire, So we scooped him up, and we're getting his ass about what he's saying. And of course, Goose, who's no longer in the club, he's a big dude, and a couple other guys, they're watching us. We're in blatant defiance of them. And he comes walking over. He will not talk to us. And he starts, didn't I tell you, to the other guy in the swordsman, didn't I tell you guys aren't supposed to handle any business? And he's looking at him going like, but they scooped me up, right? Now, in the meantime, we didn't know how shit was going to go. So Freddie and I think it was Oz, those guys had gotten into a position of a crossfire, because if it broke, again, it was 4 against whoever wanted to draw their guns, right? So anyway, they bitch at them. We get on our motorcycles and we leave. Now, Oswald and Grabin were going to meet some of the Pagans in Youngstown because they had a deal. So Freddie and I go to this truck stop and we're going to grab something to eat. And, you try not to take stuff personal, but now I took this personal. So I called up Willie Beard. And I said, Willie, I go, what the fuck is Goose's problem? He goes, what do you mean? I go, we were just at this meeting. He goes, what did he do? I go, he's telling us he wants this, he wants that. He goes, well, Goose can kind of get like the Gestapo. I go, stop right there. I go, do you know who the original Gestapo was? He goes, the fucking Nazis, us. We're the Gestapo. We don't get told what to do. I go, and then so Freddie's eating, and I'm watching him because he's like, where are you going with this? I said, I'm going to tell you something, Willie. I said, you motherfuckers want to go? We'll go with you anytime you want. I go, you just tell us where and when. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. He goes, we're not looking to fight a two-front war, because this is when they were battling, and they basically got pushed out of Philadelphia when the Pagans busted them out of Philadelphia. He goes, we're not looking to fight a two-front war with you guys. I go, there's not going to be a fight. I go, you guys just won't see it coming, Willie. And he's like, God damn it. And after that, I'm telling you, we tried to poke that bear every chance we could get with the Hells Angels, and they would get so livid, but they would never jump. They would never jump at us, ever. And it's just because, not that we were a bunch of tough guys, but what would ensue if it happened.
Right.
What they knew would happen.
Right.
What they believed what would happen. So, so that was, I mean, you talk about, it was one of those times at a club where it was like, man, this is where, you got big dogs, but all the other guys are looking at you going, this could be a problem, because this isn't, these guys are in a club, they don't have a criminal record, or they're afraid to go back to prison because that's their home.
Right.
So
right.
It was kind of unique in that way.
So
it was
Frank, what was the tripping point for this investigation that led to, you guys closing the net on it?
I had a thumb sucker as an ASAC. I mean, he was scared, denied even having meetings at the USA's office with the SAC. I don't remember being there. It was a fucking Saturday morning. Who comes in on a Saturday morning to have a meeting about what we're going to do? He wanted to shut that case down from the minute, because he had no idea. Thank God for guys like Steve Martin, who were deputy assistant directors at the time, that were fighting our battles at the headquarters level, keeping our cases alive. Yeah. Now, Chris Sadowski, who was my SAC, he was there, but the ASAC wasn't passing the information up and down. So, so what ended up happening? The biggest thing that happened that shut it down was because, like I said, we were getting into some scenarios with I could tell you countless stories about shit that happened with the Pagans. It almost became a big problem. But the big tipping point was, I get a call from Willie Beard at like 10 in the morning. This guy never was up at that time. He was a nocturnal animal. You know what I mean? He goes, I got to meet you. I go, okay. I go, when? He goes, as soon as you can. I go, wait. I go, he goes, when could you meet me? I go, give me an hour. And then he goes, and I have my car swept. I go, okay. So I know there's a problem. So I go, where are we going to meet? He goes, meet me up at the McDonald's. I go, okay. I go, we going anywhere? He goes, no. I'm like, so I had 2 guys that were at the house with me. I said, look, I got to go meet Willie. I have no idea what this is about. I go, but I need you to go up there and just cover me, because I don't know what's going on. Willie and I had a pretty damn good relationship. So I pull into McDonald's. He's in there. He goes, come on, let's get in my car. So I go sit in his car. And I'm waiting for him to put it in drive because I ain't going anywhere with him. I'm going to stop that. And he pulls out this envelope and he hands it to me. And I'm looking at it. And it's addressed to the Hells Angels, like he's chapter. He goes, open it up and tell me what you think. So I open up, I pull out this letter. And I'm looking at it. And what it is a picture of Jeff Grabman when he was a Warlock and Darren Kozlowski when he was a Warlock. They identified Jeff correctly, and they identified Darren Kozlowski as another agent who we called Bailey, right? But Jeff had slimmed down. He really didn't look as much like that. And I'm looking at it. Of course, my ass is puckered, and I'm kind of just looking. He goes, do you know those guys? I go, no. He goes, because they identified. I go, these guys ain't in my club. He goes, they're not? I go, no. I don't know who the fuck these guys are, Willie. I go, what's going on here? He goes, well, we got mailed this, and Cleveland got mailed this letter identifying you guys. Wow. He goes, we've been having meetings. He goes, we don't believe those are your guys either. He goes, however, somebody might be trying to get in your club and infiltrate you guys. You need to be careful. I'm like, holy shit. Okay, so I'm like, okay. So I grab the letter. I go back to the house, and that's another one of these son of a bitch. So I call, well, we were going to try to get around it, but the two state police guys that we had that were working with us from Pennsylvania, man, they went right to their captain. And it was like, because we know they're going to talk to our people, and there's no coming back from that. We thought we could salvage it, really, because they weren't actually accusing us of anything. Right. And we weren't really doing business with them, because at this point, we had gotten really tight with the Pagans. Mm-hmm. And we went to a wedding. So all this was happening at the same time. So we went to a pagan wedding for one of the pagan members. And we didn't wear our colors or anything like that. And they had been talking to us because they were talking about us flipping patches and becoming pagans. The Hells Angels wanted us to become a prospect club for them up in Erie. We're like, no, because we like our own thing. So we go to this wedding. And about an hour into the wedding, Lucky, who was the guy to get married, he goes, hey, there's some guys in the back want to see you guys. I'm like, okay, but only your officers can come. So it was me, Dan, and Jeff. We go back there. There's 10 pagans sitting back there, 3 of which are Mother Club members, which are that's their pinnacle. There's 13 of them that run the entire club. And then there's the rest of them that are there. And we're sitting there going, all right. And they're like, okay, who are you guys? They go, we know you're Aryan Brotherhood, but what do you want? What do you want with us? And I'm like, we want to do business with you guys. And then Pokey, who's dead now, who was a pagan, this guy, he was a Puerto Rican who had a swastika on his arm, right? And so we were doing drug deals with him. It's like, and one of the guys said, Pokey, why do you have a swastika on your arm? You're Puerto Rican. He goes, that's so my daughters don't date any of those black guys. Mm-hmm. I go, that's a fucked up philosophy, dude. I mean, anyway, but he's in there and he starts chirping. He goes, those guys got Ohio and Pennsylvania tabs. And Mother Club members said, shut up. Just shut up. We don't care about that. Because they thought of us as a cash cow, how we could get, how we can start making some money. So we talked to them guys for about 30, 40 minutes. And at the end, this is what it said. They said, we're going to take your pictures. We're going to pass them around, see if anybody knows you. And then we want to know who's in your club. Well, we had so many informants that were AB guys that were either in the prison or out. We could have given them a list of 50 guys because they didn't know how many we had. Right. They really didn't. And truly violent guys that would have been like, holy shit. But because the outing with that picture, that was my ASAC was driving it downhill. This is the point in the investigation where we wanted to get, because now we'd have free reign to roll through pagan territory and deal with whoever we wanted with their blessing, And then my ASAC comes out of nowhere and says, you guys got to end it. You got 2 weeks to get out. It's like, fucking 2 weeks. Wow. So we had to contrive this big plan that I had a brain aneurysm and died while I was down in Florida seeing my baby's mama. And of course, those guys a lot of guys who want to go to Florida for free. Goes, no, they cremated them already. Well, then, of course, we had a running affidavit and everything. So what we ended up doing is, we ended up taking everybody down. I think we got like maybe 60, 80 people. We had FFLs that were selling guns to us off. Like we'd bring females in there and they would put their information and we pay them and they buy the guns for us. We had a bunch of unique things in there. But the thing is we had 20 undercovers running at one time. We had 4 females that were either our girlfriends or running mules. We had guys that were living in 3 different areas. I mean, it was expansive. I mean, it could have went way much further. ATF was getting fearful that it was growing too big beyond their control.
Yeah.
Which it wasn't a problem. I mean, all they had to do was bring in some more people to facilitate it because we were reaching out and touching everybody. David Snow, this guy, for all his quirkiness, he got it that his own people were messed up. So David, he wanted to sleep over the house one night, and he would, guys would stay over our house every now and again. So I go, David, we don't got a bed. I go, but the couch. He goes, I don't need a bed. He goes, you got a sheet? We go, yeah, you got a sheet. So he makes this prison bed on the floor, and we give him a pillow. I got to get up in the middle of the night, go to the bathroom. I'm taking a piss. It's like 4:00 in the morning, and I opened the door, and it was like, because we always used to joke that he's going to kill us all in the middle of our sleep. And I open the door and he is right there. I about shit my pants. I go, David, can I help you? He goes, I got to take a shower. I go, David, he goes, I just need to take a shower. He goes, do you have a towel? The only thing that was hanging on the towel bar was a washcloth. I said, David, this is all I got. He goes, that'll do, brother. That'll do. I didn't sleep the rest of the night.
Yeah.
But then David and I got a good understanding. He eventually wanted to come to our chapter. Like David, he had sense. We had an issue with one of the guys could come up with this concocted story that didn't sit well with them, right? So we had a meeting in the house. So they brought up their 5 guys, and there was like 6 or 7 of us sitting in the house. Now it's fall, but it's hot. They all show up. They're all wearing jackets, hands in pockets, and our guys all got guns on, right? Comes in, it's contentious. And Paulie, who's the security officer, starts going off like, well, JB comes in. Anybody who's got guns, we got to put them on the table over there. We got to put them on the table. And so we're like, we don't have any guns, which everybody knew we had guns, right? So Paulie, now I didn't tell you this, but when I was doing the brothers case up in Akron, Paulie hung around the brothers in Akron. I knew him. I knew he never recognized me. So he was the security guy. This is a guy, he was constantly on the internet scouring for stuff. So he comes in and he starts, listen, I was in Akron. He goes, there was these 2 ATF guys. They come in and they took down all these clubs. And I'm sitting there, and everybody knew, and you could see everybody kind of edging up, kind of moving their hands towards their guns. Our guys, because they're sitting there, and he turns around to me and he goes, and he points at me, and I'm like, here we fucking go. We're going to have a slaughter right in this house. Uh-huh. And he goes, and that's why. And at that point, I lost my mind. I jumped up. I said, Paulie, sit the fuck down. I go, you are fucking conspiracy theorist, you asshole, blah, blah, blah. And I start railing on him, right? And we ended that. And then, so I'm legitimately pissed. I go, we could all just fucking, so I go and I grab this old chair and I'm sitting out on the driveway looking out over the lake. And David comes out. He goes, Junkyard, you mind if I sit down with you? I go, no, come on, David. So he pulls the chair up. He goes, Junkyard. He goes, I like how you guys do your business. He goes, I want to. Now, at this point, we'd already bought a gun and 2 off David. He goes, I think I'm going to transfer to your chapter. He goes, I like how you guys. He goes, I'm dealing with a bunch of idiots over here. And I'm just sitting there. I go, David, I'm so pissed right now. I go, you guys come up here with guns. Like, what are you going to kill us over something stupid? He goes, no, that was all JB trying to be. I go, dude, that ain't flying. He goes, I'm in all this right now. He goes, I'm done with this bullshit. He goes, we are going to be the power in this chapter. See, all this was kind of going along. And I mean, we had reached, we had another guy. His name was Wild Bill Millsaps, right? Well, this was after JB got outed and we were going to bring some other guys in. This guy had been in jail for armed robbery a couple times, right? So he gets out and they're going to bring him in. So we're at this strip club. And we're just talking about expanding, and I just threw it out there. I said, well, Bill, you wouldn't happen to have any guns for sale, would you? He goes, fuck yeah, I got guns. I go, well, can we get them? He goes, when you want to get them? I go, tonight. So I had to send one of the guys back to the office, which was about 40 minutes away, to raid the vault to get every penny we had. So we go, so I'm riding his truck, and he's drunk, and he's searching all over for his revolver that he can't find while we're driving, and the other guys are following us. So we pull up to this pretty nice house, and I'm like, there is no way this dude lives here. So we get out, we go into this house, and his dad, older guy, sitting in a chair watching TV. He goes, hey, Bill. He goes, hey, Dad. He goes, your mom's going to be home in about a half hour. He goes, you need to get the hell out of here. Because he knows. So we go upstairs into this bedroom, and he's got guns everywhere, right? He goes, well, how many do you want? I go, I'll take them all. I go, give me a good deal. I go, do you got something I can carry them out in? So he gives me this green, like, army duffel bag. And I got rifles and pistols and shotguns and whatever, revolvers in there. Probably about 10, 15 guns. We hear the door open to the house. It's his mom, June Cleaver. She comes in. She goes, hi, honey. He goes, hi, honey. She goes, Bill's here. She yells up the steps, hey, Bill. He goes, I'll be down. Bill goes, I'll be down in a minute, Mom. Now, again, we're not young, but we're old enough. I felt like I was 5 or 10 years old. Because here we are, we got our Nazi cuts on, our boots, I got this big bag of guns. We're walking down the steps, and his mom goes, hi, boys. And we don't even, hi, Mrs. Wild Bill. That's all we could call her.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she goes, would you guys like something to eat? I have some cookies. And we're going, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, none of us, it was just the funniest shit I'd ever seen in my life. You know, as far as there were a lot of stupid things that happened in these cases, but, you know, some of those things you could just, you know, these guys are just out there. And he was one of those guys, we're going to open a chapter in Akron. He goes, and we're going to kill every one of these guys. I mean, it was always kill, kill, kill. You know, we had to temper that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because obviously that'd be a problem.
God. Do we have any questions for Frank?
Yeah, I want to ask you, when we get to these questions, I want to ask you a question, because you mentioned earlier, like the cop motorcycle clubs and the military motorcycle clubs. And generally, those clubs are made up of veterans or cops who like to ride. And generally, like the 1%ers don't tend to fuck with them because they're just doing their thing. They're not impeding on their territory in terms of like drugs and stuff. But you do have those people in those clubs who, for whatever reason, idealize the 1%ers and want to get closer. Like, how would you manage, or did you have to manage that when members of these cop clubs or military clubs would want to get closer to the 1%ers?
Well, a lot of times, especially with the cop clubs, the 1%er clubs didn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
You know, they would try to force themselves in, and then every time there was an altercation or something would happen, these cop clubs would pull out, I'm a cop. Now I'm a cop.
Right.
You know, I want to be, and then they would fall back on the badge, right?
Right.
You know, so that was all, and they're not all bad, but the ones that choose to want to affiliate and go to the 1%er houses and do all that, there's no reason for you to do that. We still don't understand why as cops you even have to have a patch. Your badge is your patch. You shouldn't have to put it, you know, but that's what they choose to do. But, you know, this has happened in court where, you know, cop clubs, you know, they get in and they emulate the 1%er clubs. 3-piece patch, they have meetings, mandatory runs. And, you know, this has happened where they put these people on to testify in court. Go, what's the difference between what you do and what the 1%er clubs do? And there really is no difference. And the same thing when you get to the military clubs, they're not all bad, but you know what? The special forces is a big recruiting ground, or people who have special. Now, I will tell you, like Jeremy Sheets in ATF headquarters, Mike Will, those two guys were probably the two biggest supporters of the motorcycle cases throughout, you know, the time we've been doing them. But now they publish law enforcement, military, first responders in outlaw motorcycle gangs. Those guys are constantly going out and briefing commands, special mission units as well.
Yeah.
And they're pulling people's clearances because of their affiliation.
Yeah.
So, you know, these guys, a lot of these guys got high level access. A lot of these guys are doing a lot of training and they're recruiting these dudes into these clubs, you know, and then they're committing violence and they're getting jacked up after a great year or a great service to the United States, you know, being in the military. They're getting hooked up with these guys and they're screwing themselves up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. McIntyre, thank you very much for the very generous donation. Can you please explain why ATF isn't allowed by law to have a database to track guns and has to resort to a paper database?
Okay, so everybody thinks that ATF has this national database on guns. What ATF has is, so if it's an NFA weapon, like a Title II type of weapon, machine gun, silencer, short-barreled shotgun, short-barrel rifle, those obviously you have to pay a tax stamp and those are registered, right? Specialty weapon. ATF, the only database ATF keeps and maintains is a multiple sales database. Okay, so what that means is if you buy two or more guns at one time, not long guns, but handguns, okay, that gets reported. Now, they changed it on the southwest border to include long guns because all the stuff that was going across, Fast and Furious and all that BS, right? But the database is basically multiple sales. So what that is for straw purchases. So you got people who are going out and they're buying guns for somebody else, right? They get reported. We go back and we say, okay, and people say, well, you don't have to tell them if you have the guns. No, you don't have to tell them. But most lawful people, if I come knock on your door and go, why did you buy, 4 garbage guns? Name one. Haskell's. Pick up some garbage gun that's like a $99, $100 gun. Why did you buy 5 of them? Can you explain to me why? And then normally they'll come up with they were either stolen, something happened to them, I don't know what happened to them, and they're turning up in other parts of the state or they're gun crimes. So, and what else they're used for is like investigative leads. If you have people who go out and buy multiple guns at multiple stores over the course of a day, a week, a month, right? And then they're trafficked outward, to other places. So, and what else it's for, we use it for is like if we're doing search warrants or if you're going to a house, if I go into the database and I see, well, this house has, if it's a search warrant or what, well, this house has been on the like 5 times. There have been multiple sales reported to your house. What's going on there, right? So there's no central database like that tracks every gun you own. The FFLs only have one obligation when it comes to multiple sales, and that's to report that when you buy 2 or more handguns at one time. Okay, so that's what that's about. So it's that's a big misnomer that everybody. Yeah, I'll tell you something else about these FFLs. Because I used to go out to our firearms technology branch in Martinsburg all the time. Everybody thinks it's ATF that's jacking them. Well, let me tell you something. They were selling those shotguns on those AR and AK platforms, with the magazines. I saw them for like $200 one time, and then like 2 weeks later, I was at a gun show in Virginia, over in Norfolk area, and they were up to like 500. And I didn't tell the guy who I was. I'm just asking, why are these guns so expensive now? He goes, oh, ATF's getting ready to ban them. I go, didn't hear that. So I called John Spencer, who's in charge of our firearms technology branch, the guys who make these decisions. And I go, John, are these guns get? He goes, no. He goes, all the FFLs are putting that out because they're driving the cost up. So everybody thinks that it's ATF screwing with them. It's not. A lot of these FFLs they self, propose these hikes and all this and these shortages so they can, and not all, again, there's a lot of good quality FFLs out there, but if there's money to be made at the behest of the people thinking something's going to go offline, then they'll do it.
You were talking about the whole bumps. I think it was the bump stocks, right? Like, because we were talking about
bump stock, those braces.
Yeah, the braces, not bump stocks, but braces. But
let me tell you something about ATF. ATF, hey, I love that agency. It gave me a career, gave me a life, afforded me a lot of opportunity. However, ATF is a political football because between that, and it's not really the alcohol and the tobacco, but with the firearms, the arson, the explosives, abortion clinic investigate, all that stuff falls under the peer review of ATF, right? So for years, the NRA was battling, and it still battles with ATF. When I came on in 1989, ATF had 2,500 agents. DEA had 2,500 agents. Today, DEA has over 5,000 agents. ATF still has 2,500 agents. They don't want ATF to get any bigger. And when you talk about gun violence, like ATF's going to go in and solve these problems in Chicago, Memphis, they can't. They don't have enough people. All they can go in and tell you, hey, look, here's how we can help you. But those are state and local problems where they have to have the manpower to address it. ATF can't go in there. They don't have, ATF should have 5,000 agents if they want to be effective. Congress will not, NRA's big money. Congress will just not get off the money to expand ATF. And then the other thing about ATF is, when we were under Treasury, it was rock and roll because we could do what we wanted under the purview of Treasury, and they backed us. Once we went under DOJ, we became the redheaded stepchild to FBI and DEA, right? We were third in line. So, and we've been run by U.S. attorneys, which doesn't mean anything bad, but they're attorneys. Attorneys are risk adverse. They look at liability. They're not run by a law enforcement official. Okay. Dettelbach, I know him from Cleveland. He's a great guy. But the thing is ATF is caught in this web of not being allowed to expand and do what actually needs to be done. They do what Congress tells them because they don't have enough oomph to push back. If you told the FBI, hey, we're going to electric cars and you guys got to get on board, the ATF or FBI would tell them kiss their ass. ATF, we would park all our gas cars and we'd be riding electric cars because they don't want to get sideways with Congress because they're always fearful that the budget's going to get cut or something's going to happen. There's a lot of good leadership, but there's also a lot of people that just don't want to stand up and take the fight. Yeah. And that's how it was throughout a lot of these undercover operations throughout. You had a few guys that came up through the ranks like Steve Martin, Carlos Canino, Charlie Smith. Those guys made it up there. Those guys knew what it was like to be on the ground and go up. Then you got a bunch of guys that just promoted up through that, not on my watch. I don't want any black marks by my name because I got to get to the next level. And when you lose the confidence that right now, you talk to all the guys that are out in the field, there's no safety net. There's no safety net. And that's how they're operating. It used to be a very proactive agency. Now it's becoming more reactive agency, but so is most of law enforcement.
Yeah. McIntyre, thank you again for another very generous donation. How much of Hunter Thompson's book do you feel is accurate? The Hell's Angels book.
Whose book?
Hunter S. Thompson.
I don't know if I read that book.
Okay, gonzo journalist. Reader. Yeah. McIntyre, thank you very much. What do you know about the Booze Fighters Outlaw Club? They seem to draw a lot of active military and vets into their group. They used to have a clubhouse in Okinawa, Japan.
The Booze Fighters are, I think they're the oldest club, but they go by their alphabet. And, you never really saw those guys get too criminal. I mean, most of them are, they got a lot of cops. They got a lot of veterans. It's more of a social riding club, I would say. It's not, I wouldn't, to classify them as an outlaw motorcycle gang only maybe because they wear a 3-piece patch and they subscribe to things, but they're not in it like the rest of them are. I mean, they will associate and affiliate, but not to the degree that some of the other clubs do.
Yeah. Luis Vasquez, thank you very much for it's just a sticker. Thank you. And then a couple questions on Patreon. Did your knowledge of tobacco from the ATF assist you in starting your cigar company, and how?
Well, no. My cigar company, it kind of started because I like to smoke cigars. So, in working in the government and still working in it, contracting out, it was like sometimes you just want to get away from all that and do something different. I started smoking cigars years ago. No, my knowledge. ATF has nothing to do with my business, thank Lord. And, it's all state regulated and I don't have to deal with them people in any way, shape or form. Because, if I was doing cigarettes, it might be a little something different, but not with cigars.
What is your cigar company? Let people know where they can find it.
It's Black River Tobacco Company. You can find us online at www.blackrivertobacco.com. We don't sell cigars online yet. We have a bunch of, gear that we sell. If you're interested in buying cigars, you can call us and we'll ship them to you. I just have to send you what our inventory is because I'm telling you, our country, man, they don't want, the banks don't want to take tobacco money. They don't want to have anything to do with cigars and cigarettes anymore. It's tough to find a bank that'll take the money and
sounds like Marxism to me.
Yes, it's terrible. It is. I'm telling you, you can't even have a vice anymore.
It's ridiculous.
How does an undercover agent deal with initiation challenges for gangs when it comes to illegal activity?
You know, a lot. The most illegal activity that they're going to have you do, like I said, the one where we did the home invasion was an anomaly. Most of it has to do with fighting, you know, or mud check. You know, it's like I said, the drugs. You know, we've learned how to subvert that and get around that, but most of it, I mean, they're not going to say, here's a gun, go in there and rob somebody, you know, go in there and rob a store. A lot of it is based on, you know, who your sponsor is, what they feel of you, because you'll see some prospects will be treated like dirt. And then on the other side, you'll see some prospects that they feel might bring something to the club. Like the old school peeing on the colors and pooping on the colors and pouring. No, clubs respect their colors now. You know, they don't do that. The only club that's like that, really, the only 1% club that's truly like that is still the Pagans. They still run like they're in the 70s. I'll give them that. But everybody else, man, you know, they have 1-2 sets of colors. They have their dress colors. They have their daily colors. It's a whole different world, you know, different world.
What effect, if any, did Sons of Anarchy have on outlaw motorcycle gangs and law enforcement efforts to investigate them? Did they give away any trade secrets of note?
You know, you know, what was funny about that series is ATF was always portrayed as assholes in that series, which we all got a good laugh at because, you know, at first, I think the first couple seasons, the Vagos were the ones that were giving them their, their expertise or whatever. And then after that, then the Hells Angels took it over. That's where every time anything related to ATF was brought in, it was always brought in a bad light. But Sons of Anarchy, for the first couple of years, it was pretty spot on with a lot of the stuff that they talked about, you know, who were giving them their advice, who were directing them. Then it kind of got way out of control. And, you know, because, you know, it's TV, you know, nothing in real life is ever as sexy as it is TV. There are some things that happen and some craziness, but it's nothing like Sons of Anarchy at all.
Yeah.
I don't think it impacted any investigations because it was on while other investigations were going on, you know.
And then what is your opinion of how the investigation and prosecution of the Waco Twin Peaks shootout was conducted at both the state and federal level? Do we have the whole story, or is there still more to trickle out someday?
You know, that case, you know, I had a good buddy, Darren Kozlowski went and testified down in that. I mean, the fact that, you know, I mean, I think there were some, according to the guys that I talked to that were involved in that investigation and that testified, there were some balls that were dropped. There were people that should have been charged. I mean, if you watch the video, I mean, you know, it could only be so much self-defense. But no, the story's out there. There wasn't anything that was being hidden. It was just in the way that they prosecuted the case. It didn't bring, you know, a good end result.
Yeah. I just, you know, you've talked about these really big cases with these, you know, with these bad actors, very bad actors. And, you know, there are going to be people who comment later on about ATF and, you know, the issues, whether it's DEA, ATF, you know, feds. What is your response to people who talk about, like, the federal, like if we were to talk about Ruby Ridge or whatever, you know, like when people, because people are obviously going to comment on this about the ATF going after the everyman. Not that, you know, not that Ruby Ridge was the everyman, but like, what would you say to people who are critical of organizations?
So here's the deal. I can only speak for the guys that I know and that I respect in law enforcement. You go after people who are doing truly evil, bad things, right? If they're not, you let them go. I can tell you, I never took it personal when you look at, you know, who you're targeting, because they've either presented themselves in such a manner that they're doing something wrong. You know, everybody talks about ATF, you know, the gun law. We don't write the gun laws. Right. Congress writes the gun law. If you don't like the laws, go to your congressman, go to your senator, and get them changed. We only enforce them. So if you're supposed to have a gun, have all you can. If you're not supposed to have a gun, don't get caught, because if you get caught, you're going to prison. So, I mean, it's like anything with the drugs. I mean, whatever they do. So, you can disparage law enforcement. You can disparage, there's always allegations of entrapment. There's always, this and that. And we're like, go to court, show where we are entrapped, because that's why I could tell you the guys that do, especially the infiltrations, Jay Dobbins, Mark Demas, Darren Kozlowski, myself. You got Blake Boltler, Daryl. I mean, there's countless guys, right? Billy Queen. Those guys, people think because you're an undercover, you're a jackass, right? They think, oh, it's all fun and games and you're out there drinking.
Cowboys.
No. Yeah. And even in our own agency, it's like, oh, the skeleton needs to come out of the closet, dust it off, let it go do its thing, and get back in the closet. My SAC told me one time, he goes, Frank, all those tattoos, he goes, what will people think? I said, well, let me ask you something, Chris. And this was Chris Sadowski. I said, Chris, do you pay me for what I look like? He goes, no. I go, I can wear long sleeves like you do because you're a suit. I go, I don't aspire to be you and be a suit. I go, let me ask you another question. I go, would you rather me be administratively sound or operationally sound? And he goes, operationally. I go, into my point. I go, all that other bullshit is administrative. You can't die from that. I go, so all the guys that I know that did these type of cases, and there's countless, I'm missing people. I mean, Steve Martin, you have to know how to process everything. It wasn't until the mid 2000s where you were processing your own evidence, writing all your own reports, doing all of your electronic surveillance tapes, downloading them, transcribing them. I mean, you have to know something about the game. And like I said before, we never put anybody in jail who didn't deserve to be there. In fact, like I said, sometimes we would try to steer them away from the activity that they wanted to do, but because of the sexiness of being involved in a criminal organization, a rock stars, all that goes along with that entire lifestyle. I mean, that they get involved for that. And we try to tell people, even today, you see guys, it's like, why are you involved in that?
Yeah.
There's no point.
Yeah.
Frank, this has been one of the most roller coaster ride, over the top interviews we've ever done.
It's been fantastic, yeah.
In 222 episodes. And
listen,
thank you so much.
I could talk for hours more. And if you guys want to bring some of the other guys in, there is just so much more to talk about.
Frank, I would love to bring you and some of your buddies up here to Brooklyn to do another interview, man. Yeah. This has been awesome. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us.
And real quick, where can people find you again? Both to Scar, wherever you're at out in public, where can people find you?
Well, they could find us through the cigar, but I also have another company called Hard Knock Schoolhouse. It's hkschoolhouse.com. You can reach me there, or you can reach me through the website, the blackrivertobacco.com.
There you go.
We got social media and whatnot, and I hope people aren't going to call and say, "Hey, you're an asshole. You're an ATF agent." I go, I get a lot of people don't like the cops, and they don't like a lot of that, and we're used to it. So I'm thick-skinned by now. You're not going to.
I get it. I get it.
So it is what it is.
Well, fellas out there, we will be back on Tuesday, right, D? Yep. Tuesday with Andy Stumpf. Cleared Hot podcast, former SEAL Team 6 officer, I think NCO and then officer.
NCO and SEAL Team 6 officer, vanilla.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have him on the show on Tuesday. Frank, again, man, thank you so much for coming on. I know we ran way over our time, but it was worth it. It was worth it for us.
And we definitely want to have you back on.
Yeah.
We want to have you in the studio, smoke some stogies. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, then okay, I'll come.
All right,
and I'll
man.
bring some guys and some stogies and
yeah.
some shine, and we'll have a good time. You just let me know when.
We are down for it.
We'll do it, man.
Hey, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having on. I know I'm a different animal from what you guys are used to having on, and It's just my family's like, "Are you really going to go on here and talk?" I go, I don't care. I go,
It's
it is what it is.
Different animals, same zoos, though, Frank. I mean, it's all great. Like we love it.
Look, final comment. I've said in the past, maybe privately, I interview a lot of people from the intelligence community, special operations community, and I always run up against, especially doing a public interview like this, I can't really talk about that. But with guys like you, where your cases have been prosecuted, it's just like game on, and you can tell the whole story from front to back, and it's just amazing.
It's amazing stuff.
It is.
Well, I'll tell you just one last comment. So,
sure.
Just in dealing with some of the guys that we, on the military side that would come to our training and we would go to their training and, we got to make a lot of good friends. And it was always funny because, we would sit there in awe and listen to their stories, right? And they're like, well, it's no big deal. This is what we do every day. And then we would tell our stories and they would sit there in awe going, holy shit. And just the mutual respect, although the operations are different, the sacrifices and the hardships are no less.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's where the camaraderie comes with all of that. People just, and not everybody has the same road, but there are a lot of different things that go along with traveling the road that a lot of us have traveled.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Hardcore,
absolutely.
Man. Well, we'll stay in touch, man. We'll love to do it again. And man, again, thank you for coming on the show and spending some of your Friday evening with us.
Yeah, we deeply appreciate it.
You're going to need to get bigger couch because none of us are small enough to fill this.
we got several other chairs we can push up here.
Okay, bean bags are good. I don't know if we can get up.
I was just thinking about that. Some bean bags would be awesome.
It can be done.
Of course, we'd have to cut before anybody got up because nobody wants to see a bunch of 50-year-old guys
rolling out of it. We'd be rolling off.
Exactly.
Nobody.
Yeah,
it can be done. All right, guys. We'll see. We'll see everyone on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.